The news spread like wildfire through the frozen streets of Frosttown. The Lord was hosting a meeting of monumental importance. Sulawesi, the finance minister, made the mission clear: budget is no obstacle, make sure you get the show right. The townspeople weren't worried, they were ecstatic. For too long, outsiders had dismissed Frosttown as a remote wasteland of coal and cabbage. Now it was time to show the world their true spirit. At the construction site of the new 3-story welcome building, the foreman's breath steamed in the winter air as he rallied his men. Give it your all. He shouted, let those gentlemen in their fancy carriages see that we build houses faster than they count their gold coins. Workers chanted rhythmic songs, mixing improved cement and hauling planks with newfound energy. During their breaks, they huddled over hot soup, gossiping about the guest list. Would the Lady of Ironforge really be there? Could she truly bend iron bars with her bare hands? They vowed that every fireplace would be spotless and every mattress stuffed with the fluffiest feathers. High above in the administrative center, Benjamin watched the bustle. His advisor, Sullivan, had been right. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a showcase of governance, potential, and military readiness. To win allies, they had to prove they weren't just a poor frontier outpost. The first guest arrived ahead of schedule, braving a fierce snowstorm. It was Lord Erwin Hawthorne of Silverbrook. He greeted Benjamin with a massive hug and a flurry of advice. Erwin was a master of public relations. He saw this as a golden opportunity for brand building. He offered to take over the banquet planning, provided his name was listed as a co-organizer. Benjamin laughed, happily handing over the burden of menus and servant training to his enthusiastic neighbor. With Erwin's expertise, the preparations shifted into high gear. However, the help came with a price. Benjamin had to endure Erwin's constant, prying questions. The Lord of Silverbrook was obsessed with Frosttown's innovations, from the layout of the administrative center to the efficiency of the public heating system. Benjamin, my friend, Erwin would ask daily, could I borrow your construction team? Could I have the plans for this heating system? As the town transformed, Benjamin realized that while he was preparing for a crisis, he had accidentally started a revolution in local industry. In Frosttown, the air is thick with the mundane. Lord Erwin debates whether to serve ibex or trout for the upcoming council banquet, while workers bicker over the height of a chandelier. But miles away, Baron Benjamin Blackwood is worlds apart. He is performing his daily must-do, a soul journey. A mental link with Bishop Sokka, who is currently trapped in the living hell of the royal capital. The moment Benjamin goes online, he is nearly jolted out of the connection. 4 longswords flash in his vision, slashing toward his neck and chest. Whoa, Benjamin yells internally. Sokka, my timing is always unfortunate. Nothing is unfortunate, Baron, Sokka replies, his voice eerily calm. Everything in this city wants to kill me now. With a blur of motion, Sokka blocks the blades with his bare forearms. He spins, delivering a thunderous roundhouse kick that sends a mutated soldier crashing through a stone wall. Benjamin feels the recoil in his own phantom limbs. Before he can process the impact, more ashen-faced monsters surge forward. Sokka doesn't flinch. 10 threads of shimmering golden light burst from his fingertips, weaving through the air like serpents. With a sharp twitch of his fingers, sizzle, the threads tighten. The soldiers are instantly reduced to silent, neat chunks of flesh. Decisive, Benjamin mutters, feeling nauseous from the first-person view. Death is a relief for some, Sokka says compassionately, even as he vaults a wall with the agility of a man who hasn't slept in 4 days. But Benjamin notices the cost. Sokka, you are bleeding at a frightening speed. A superficial injury, the bishop dismisses. He crouches in a secluded corner, peering toward the main thoroughfare. A haunting procession fills the street. Thousands of citizens, men, women, and children march in a vacant, sleepwalking trance toward the sinister silhouette of the royal palace. A transformation ritual, Sokka whispers. Benjamin feels the bishop's thoughts begin to fracture, a violent collision of rage and instability. Sokka, calm down, Benjamin shouts, acting as a mental anchor. You are a bishop of the church, the one who finds the truth, not a fanatical butcher. Breathe. The mental storm subsides. Sokka's voice turns cold once more. You are right, Baron, I lost my composure. Sokka retreats into the shadows, his eyes fixed on the palace. I must find a vantage point. Do not contact me for a few days, Baron. This connection is a burden we cannot afford. The snow in Frost Town fell gently, as if tempering its temper to welcome the distinguished guests from afar. Two carriages, bearing the proud coats of arms of Grape Valley and Windmill Town, rolled toward the entrance. The two lords within had spent the journey complaining of the damned weather, but as the town's outline sharpened through the mist, their grumbles turned to whispers of shock. "Look at those chimneys," one exclaimed. "So many workshops, and the people, aren't they cold?" At the town entrance they were met not by mud but by a covered-in and neatly dressed staff. "Sirs," a receptionist greeted them warmly, "to ensure smooth traffic, please use our dedicated transportation." Driven by curiosity, the lords followed him to the rear, where two parallel wooden tracks stretched into the distance. Waiting there was a strange, glass-windowed carriage. A short-distance track carriage, the attendant boasted, pulled by specially trained horses, no bumps, no jostles, and equipped with heaters. The lords boarded with suspicion, but were met with soft leather seats, a radiating copper heater, and steaming cups of fruit tea. With a soft whistle, the carriage began to move. There was no jolting, no noise of stone, only a sensation of gliding on ice. Lord Grape Valley murmured, "It is like sitting on a cloud." The carriage came to a smooth stop at the Frost Welcome Building, a structure of sharp, modern lines. They walked a red carpet flanked by guards in gleaming armor, their spears held high. As they pushed through heavy oak doors, a gentle, dry warmth enveloped them. There were no smoky fireplaces, the heat seemed to breathe directly from the walls. Benjamin and Erwin of Silverbrook arrived to greet them. While Erwin charmed the crowd, Benjamin used his secret Nen blade to telepathically check on the kitchen. "Customer service assistant Ben at your service," he teased the chef, Chesvia. After a startled mental scolding from her, he confirmed the appetizers were ready. Suddenly, the fiery alpacas stormed toward him. "Benjamin," she barked, pointing a finger at his nose, "those track wagons, I need the craftsmen, my mines need that technology." Benjamin chuckled, handing her a small glass of clear liquid. "Relax, Ella, try some Linguin happy water first." She gulped it down. A second later, she was coughing violently, her face turning bright red. "Are you trying to murder me?" she gasped. Benjamin laughed, stepping back. "That is the Baron's passion." Their laughter was cut short by a piercing eagle cry. A magnificent griffin swooped from the sky, its talons tearing the snow. As a stoic figure dismounted, Ella whispered, "You didn't say you invited that deadpan guy." Benjamin watched Calvin approach, whispering back, "To be honest, I didn't expect him to actually come." Calvin's arrival was like a sudden blast of cold air, subtly chilling the enthusiastic atmosphere at the entrance of the reception building. Benjamin had sent the invitation out of mere formality, a nod to the integrity of the Allied network, never truly expecting his former ally to appear, after all. Stonecliff was the gateway to the north, and Calvin was a man whose inner thoughts were more complex than a bard's epic tale. Yet there he stood like an ice sculpture, drawing the secret gaze of everyone present. Benjamin took a deep breath, fixed a polite smile to his face, and stepped forward. The two men met in the middle of the red carpet, maintaining a distance that was neither impolite nor intimate. Then, silence. Benjamin smiled, but Calvin's blue eyes remained unfocused, drifting toward the reflections in the glass windows. The air seemed to freeze. Only the faint crackling of a distant fire broke the stillness. Benjamin's mind raced at high speed. How should he begin? A joke about Griffin food? No, too frivolous. A question about the Northern rebels? No, that was a conversational lan. D-mine, he knew Calvin too well. The man was a walking contradiction, the light of knights born of noble blood yet forged in fire. If Benjamin acted submissive, Calvin would despise him as weak, but if Benjamin acted as a true equal, Calvin's noble pride would feel stung by the reminder that Benjamin was once a mere servant. For 6 years in the Brave Squad, Benjamin had walked this tightrope. But now he was the Baron of Frosttown. He had earned his lordship through blood and struggle. Why should he still play these games? Just as the silence shifted from meaningful to purely awkward, a crisp, impatient voice shattered the ice. "Hey, you two!" Ella marched over, her arms crossed in annoyance. "Are you putting on a mime show? I am getting goosebumps." Benjamin silently thanked the heavens for Ella. Taking advantage of the break in tension, he steadied his voice. "Welcome to Frosttown, Calvin. Thank you for making the long journey. I have looked forward to discussing the future of the kingdom with you." Calvin seemed to exhale, finally breaking free from his own rigid silence. He nodded slightly. Yes, Baron Benjamin, I also thank you for the invitation. He glanced around the impressive new structures before adding dryly, your renovation here is quite nice. It was a clumsy compliment, reminiscent of the time Calvin tried to tell a joke and could only manage to say the moon was round. Benjamin didn't linger on the awkwardness. With a graceful gesture toward the warmth of the hall, he led his old friends inside, away from the cold and toward the beginning of the feast. The banquet hall was thick with the aroma of roasting meat and the heavy, unmistakable scent of aristocratic socializing. Chesvia, temporarily trading her chef's whites for a dark blue dress, slipped through the crowd of waiters to find Benjamin. Her eyes danced with mischief as she nudged him, whispering, "If Calvin and Ella joined forces, wouldn't they just crush every lord in the commune like speed bumps?" Benjamin nearly choked on his fruit wine. He suppressed a cough, maintaining his practiced social smile. "It is not that exaggerated," he murmured. "If Baron Guys and I joined forces, we could at least act as a sturdy crash barrier." His gaze drifted across the room. There was Ella, the leader of the Iron Forge. She had purged the old guilds, creating a force of incredible cohesion, but she was straightforward, relying on morale and direct confrontation. Then his eyes settled on Calvin, who sat alone, methodically cutting a piece of roast goose. Calvin was the true danger. He held the Griffin Knights, an air force with absolute superiority in a world that still relied on horses and flags. "It is practically cheating," Benjamin whispered. Chesvia nodded. "I see, one heavy ground tank and one strategic bomber. I suppose our defense relies entirely on the friendship barrier between you and that reckless Baron of Blackrock." The evening. NG was a masterpiece of theater orchestrated by Erwin Hawthorne of Silverbrook. The food was ornate, a roasted goose posed as if crowing, a calf with skin like spun gold, but as Erwin often said, at these banquets taste is secondary, display is everything. Benjamin moved through the crowd like a social butterfly, discussing frostbitten grapes with one lord and flower costs with another. But beneath the laughter, Benjamin felt an undercurrent, fear. These lords were searching for security. They looked at the fortifications of Frosttown with hungry, anxious eyes. They weren't just here for dinner, they were looking for a leader strong enough to protect them from the coming chaos. As the music swelled, Erwin slipped toward Benjamin, his smile impeccable. "How are the preparations?" he asked quietly. "The atmosphere is set," Benjamin replied, relaxing his shoulders. "They have seen what they need to see." Erwin leaned in, his voice a mere breath. "I have rehearsed my opening remarks 1,000 times. I guarantee it will get everyone's emotions going." Benjamin chuckled, his mind already turning toward the stage they had built. He wondered, could he be a good enough actor to pull this off? The banquet was drawing to a close. Exquisite dishes, more props for conversation than sustenance, sat half-eaten on silver platters. The air was thick with the scent of wine and the heavy, satisfied hum of finalized business deals. Lord Elwyn Hawthorne of Silverbrook rose, tapping a silver spoon against a crystal glass. The crisp asterisk clink 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 asterisk cut through the chatter. With a salesman's practiced smile, Elwyn began his transition. He spoke of Frosttown's miracles, the rail wagons, the central heating, and the modern workshops, shamelessly positioning his own territory as an indispensable ally. Then, with an elegant gesture, he shifted the spotlight to the man beside him. "I believe," Elwyn projected, "Lord Benjamin Blackwood has something important to share." All eyes turned. Benjamin stood ramrod straight. He offered no flowery greetings. Instead, his first words struck the warm air like an icicle. "Ladies and gentlemen, the kingdom of Lingfeng is on the verge of collapse." A deathly silence fell. In the corner, the mysterious Calvin stared intently at Benjamin, his blue eyes searching for a crack in the young lord's resolve. Benjamin did not blink. He met Calvin's gaze and continued, his voice low but penetrating. "The West has raised a banner of rebellion. Foreign tribes occupy the South, and the king's heirs, they are eyeing your territories with covetous intent." Benjamin's gaze swept over the pale-faced minor lords. "To the old king you were loyal pawns, but to his descendants, you are merely remnants of the old regime, destabilizing factors, legacies that need to be cleared away." He paused, letting the fear fester. "You are weak, you have no ancient armies, no marriage alliances. Faced with annexation, you are utterly vulnerable." It was an exaggeration, but it struck the heart of their deepest terrors. Then, Benjamin poured the catalyst. I propose an idea. Let the United Commune become more than a trade pact. Let us turn it into a truly unbreakable alliance, a state within a state. One voice, one military, one economy. Beside him, Elwyn's fingers trembled. Was it excitement, or pure, unadulterated terror at the treasonous scale of the plan? The silence was finally shattered by Gus of Blackrock territory. He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. My territory is mine, he roared. I earned it with blood. Anyone who reaches for it gets their claws chopped off. Gus's endorsement was the first domino. Then Lady Ira Pacas stood, her eyes clear and unwavering. One by one, the lesser lords rose, abandoning their tables to stand with Benjamin. Soon the hall was divided. On one side stood the new alliance, resolute and defiant. On the other sat only one man. Calvin remained alone in the corner. He slowly finished the last drop of his wine, put down the glass, and looked up. All eyes were fixed on him, the final outsider. Deep inside the reception building, 3 long shadows flicker against dark tapestries, cast by a roaring fire. Benjamin sprawls in a high-backed chair, clutching a jar of Linguan happy water, a liquid as crystal clear as it is dangerously potent. He gulps a glass, lets out a long sigh of relief, and erupts into a roar of laughter that echoes through the private room. Did you see them? Benjamin gasps, gesturing wildly. When Calvin stood up and said, I have no objection, instead of drawing his sword, their jaws hit the floor. They thought you were going to flip the table, but instead you joined the club. He slaps his thigh, delighted by the memory of the Lord's stunned expressions. Opposite him sits Calvin. His back is rigid, but his face is flushed a deep, unnatural red, half from the fire, half from the liquid flame he just forced down his throat. He stares expressionlessly at his glass, his neck veins bulging as he fights back a cough. Does my attitude make those rabble happy? He asks, his voice thick with alcohol-induced impatience. Before he can recover, Ella, quick as a flash, snatches the jug and refills Calvin's glass to the brim. You were so cool at the banquet, she grins mischievously. Drink up, knight. The scene they left behind was one of pure theater. The banquet hall had expected Calvin to defend the royal honor with steel. Instead, he had simply straightened his cuffs and announced that while Stonecliff would not join the commune, he had no objection to the alliance. He even promised to keep an eye on things. To the lords, this was a bombshell. It meant Benjamin's new alliance had the tacit approval of Princess Celia's forces. Security surged, doubts vanished. But the truth was a hidden game. Before the banquet, Benjamin had used his new Nen Blade ability to send Calvin a secker. Message, we are putting on a show for the princess's sake. Calvin, believing this alliance would create a powerful shield for Princess Celia, agreed to play along. Ella, however, remains conflicted. She was thrust into the role of a founding elder without warning. She glares at the laughing Benjamin, certain his ambitions go far beyond helping a princess. She wishes her mind-reading blade actually worked on him, just to see the blueprint he's hiding behind that fox-like smile. Benjamin finally settles, his eyes clearing. Stop laughing, he says, turning serious. Calvin, you must remain the outsider, keep the pressure on, question us, warn us, but never break with us. That fear will keep the alliance united. Calvin gives a vague, unfocused nod. Benjamin quickly stops Ella from pouring another round, pointing at the swaying knight. That's enough, Ella, we have the capital to discuss, but we can only do that once our external force regains his senses. The liquor in Frost Town is dangerously strong. That was the only thought Calvin could hold on to as Benjamin rambled on about the capital's devastation and the formation of a new alliance. To Calvin, the serious words felt like a warm, domineering ball of cotton filling his skull, keeping out the danger and leaving only a dizzying sense of comfort. Did you listen to what I said? Benjamin asked, his voice sounding worried and far away. Calvin waved a hand impatiently. Of course he had listened. The capital was a slaughterhouse. Conrad had gone mad. Politics, villains, children. It was all so annoying. He was in a wonderful mood and didn't want this nonsense to spoil his fun. He tried to tell Benjamin to be quiet, but his tongue felt like lead. I think he's drunk. Ella's voice drifted over sharp and mocking. Drunk? Nonsense. Calvin wanted to protest, but his lips felt glued shut. He decided to prove his sobriety through action. He mustered his willpower as if swimming through thick syrup and forced his arm to wobble upward toward the ceiling. Benjamin just stared in bewilderment at the trembling hand suspended in midair. Fine, Calvin thought, if a hand isn't enough, I'll stand up. He gripped the armrests and heaved. The chair groaned under the strain and then crash. The chair tipped and Calvin fell like a felled pine tree, landing solidly on the thick carpet with a dull thud. Ella's unrestrained laughter filled the room. Calvin lay there, not feeling any pain. The carpet was soft, the fireplace was warm. Why bother getting up? From the floor, he heard the slurred conversation above him. Ella was pouring more wine, her voice full of drunken arrogance. "Making me happy is the most important thing," she declared. Benjamin's voice was becoming a stuttering mess. "This alcohol is a terrible thing," he muttered. "I've forgotten what I was going to say." Soon Ella began wailing a song off-key, while Benjamin tapped a spoon against his glass in a rhyme. Mick disaster. It was a song from their old days, from the hero's party. For a moment, the room felt smaller, the melancholy of their separate lives fading into the crackle of the fire. "Wait," Benjamin suddenly shouted, sparked by a drunken inspiration. "There is an opportunity for adventure right now in the mountains behind my house. We've discovered the ruins of an ancient civilization. The gate is open. It's pitch black, full of traps, monsters, and curses." He didn't even finish the sentence. Calvin, who had been lying as still as a rug, suddenly snapped upright like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. He stood ramrod straight, his eyes shining with an intense, drunken fire as he stared at Benjamin. "Why not go?" Calvin shouted, his voice trembling with excitement. "Why not take the risk?" In that moment, he wasn't a lord burdened by responsibility. He was just a man, reminiscing, and ready to run into the dark once more. The headache felt like a team of miners were tunneling through Calvin's brain. His stomach churned, a wildly spinning windmill of nausea, as he struggled to wake. He barely opened his eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling before the swaying bed forced him to lunge toward a wooden barrel in the corner. Roast goose, beef, and chicken from last night's banquet gushed out in a violent, undignified clatter. As he slumped to the cold floor, gasping for air, a second wave hit. He retched until only bitter bile remained. "Lord Calvin," an emotionless female voice sounded behind him. "The Baron has asked me to inform you that breakfast is ready." Calvin turned with bloodshot eyes to see a young woman in sleek, dark clothing. She was no ordinary maid. "Who are you?" he rasped. "I am the Baron's secretary, Evelyn." Calvin's mind was a fog. He barely remembered the banquet, something about Benjamin's smug face, and ruins. He struggled to his feet, his bones protesting every movement. Take me there." As they stepped into the hall, a deafening sound of vomiting erupted from the opposite room. Calvin glanced in to see Ella kneeling on the floor, hair matted with sweat, while a pale, white-haired woman stood over her. Seeing Ella in an even worse state, Calvin felt a strange, petty sense of superiority. In the dining room, Benjamin sat at the head of a long table. The other lords offered respectful glances as Calvin slumped into his seat. Before him sat a jar of steaming goat's milk and honey. Though unrefined for a nobleman, Calvin didn't care. He gulped the warm liquid down 3 large glasses until the dizziness finally began to subside. "Benjamin," Calvin said, his blue eyes sharpening, "that ruin you mentioned, when do we set off?" Benjamin looked troubled. "Now, that is too hasty. It requires preparation. Tomorrow at the earliest." He patted Calvin's shoulder. "Explore the town. The ruins in the back mountains aren't going anywhere." Later, Evelyn led Calvin through the streets of Fro. They reached the corporate park, where massive stone factories billowed white smoke. The air roared with the clanging of metal and the hiss of steam. There he spotted Ella, looking radiant and sober, arguing over blueprints with a man in filthy work clothes. "Would I lie?" Ella's voice was confident. "I brought the latest prototypes." Calvin watched in silence, a heavy feeling of being left behind sinking into his chest. While he guarded his territory with old steel, Benjamin and Ella were racing into a future he didn't understand. Evelyn watched him closely, then spoke softly. "By the way, Lord Calvin, the Baron has a small problem with his surplus forage. He is looking for better livestock breeds, but his channels are limited." Evelyn brought up the troubles of raising livestock with a casual air, but Calvin interrupted her abruptly. His gaze was fixed on the roaring factory, yet his mind was clearly elsewhere. "Northern woolly cattle," he mused aloud. "Thick-skinned, cold-resistant, and excellent for training the hunting instincts of griffin cubs." He turned to Evelyn, the bloodshot haze of a hangover fading from his blue eyes to reveal a sharp, military coldness. He noted that once the snow stopped, these open spaces would be perfect for training, assuming, of course, she had the courage to raise such beasts. Evelyn remained expressionless, simply nodding as she led him toward the settlement's administrator, Sullivan. The man was swamped by local lords, looking utterly exhausted, his dark circles reminding Calvin of a sleep-deprived scholar. Calvin had no interest in the tedious debates over wool transport rates and quickly moved on. At the training grounds, they encountered Diona, a spirited guard who immediately challenged the renowned knight to a duel. Despite his heavy head, Calvin's curiosity was piqued by Diona's unusual twin pistols. The contest was swift. With years of honed skill, Calvin suppressed the flashy attacks, ending the bout with his training sword hovering precisely under Diona's armpit. When asked about his strange style, Diona credited a man named Finn. Calvin felt a flicker of surprise. The wandering poet, it seemed the old hero's party was more involved here than he had realized. The atmosphere shifted as they entered a kitchen filled with the scent of baking. There stood Chesvia, her silvery white hair glowing in the firelight. Calvin's posture stiffened instantly. "Why are the chosen of the Pale Church here?" he demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. Chesvia tried to claim she was merely a cook and a doctor, but Calvin wouldn't have it. That hair was a divine mark. Finally, she sighed, jokingly claiming to be a secret agent codenamed Nonstick Pan. Calvin snorted, unconvinced, yet he couldn't deny the quality of the cookies she pressed into his hand. Finally, Evelyn led him to Walter, the military commander. Instead of a sand table, Calvin found Walter hunched over a book titled *Aritham. Etic and its applications. When questioned why he wasn't training troops, Walter looked up with a fanatical light in his eyes. "Lord Calvin," he said firmly, "I have learned that an excellent strategist must be an excellent mathematician." Calvin stood in stunned silence for a moment before asking dryly, "Walter, why were you never this diligent when you served under me?" Inside the administrative center of Frosttown, the air was thick with Sullivan's desperate wailing. "Your Excellency, you cannot go." The administrator's face was pale, his voice trembling as he paced. "You are a lord now. The lives of tens of thousands rest on your shoulders. If anything happens to you in those ruins, what would we do?" Benjamin didn't even turn around. He stood before a mirror, stretching his wrists as he adjusted a set of worn, well-maintained leather armor. "I understand the logic, Sullivan," he replied calmly. "But Calvin and Ella are lords too. If they dare to explore while I hide in the back, what will the Alliance think of me? That their barren is all talk and no action." Benjamin turned, perfectly mimicking Sullivan's worried tone. I know, Lord Calvin is the knight's answer and Lady Ella is the melting rose." He flashed a grin. "But if they are so strong, shouldn't I be safe following them? If the sky falls, the tall ones will hold it up. I'll just stand back and cheer." Chesvia leaned against the wall, rolling her eyes. "Stop it, Sullivan. Look at his face. He's more excited than if he'd just closed a massive trade deal. He's been cooped up too long." Caught red-handed, Benjamin laughed. "Fine, Chesvia is right. I'm looking forward to it. But," he added, his voice turning serious, "theory cannot compare to on-site investigation. I need first-hand information." He patted Sullivan's shoulder. "Don't worry, if there's real danger, I'll be the first to run." "Then take me with you," Benjamin said, pointing at Chesvia. She blinked in surprise, but Benjamin was firm. "Your Nen blade is essential for healing and analysis. I've already cleared it with the others." With a resigned sigh, Chesvia agreed. At the mountain crevice, Bishop Aphrodite sat huddled in a thick blanket, clutching a heater. "May the goddess bless you," he muttered through the cold. "Keep the communication lines open." Calvin, now clad in light chainmail, eyed Benjamin. "I thought the pampered life of a lord had worn away your courage." "Who can say?" Benjamin replied, checking his gear. Instead of his famous elven longbow, he drew a custom-built three-shot hand crossbow. "This is better for close quarters, and this sword, my brother forged it himself." Ella, already holding a glowing fluorite stone, grew impatient. "Gentlemen, stop dawdling. I'm going down now, and if you're too slow, I'm keeping all the treasure." With a nimble leap, she vanished into the dark. Benjamin and Calvin exchanged a look. "Looks like someone is more anxious than we are, Benjamin." En chuckled, he hooked a lantern to his belt, and together they stepped into the depths. The passage was narrow, the rock walls scarred by fresh scratches and pry marks. Chesvia's voice was a mere whisper in Benjamin's ear, like the cooing of a startled pigeon. She confessed that her greatest adventure had been a simple train ride to school, a memory she now called adorably naive. She clung to the strap of Benjamin's armor as if it were her only lifeline to the waking world. Benjamin offered a low, steadying reply, perhaps a bit deceptive, encouraging her that the courage she used then could sustain her now, but Chesvia wasn't buying it. "The fear of a new school," she hissed, "is nothing like the fear of a collapsing cave or a lurking monster." Their hushed bickering was cut short when Ella, the dissolving rose, abruptly stopped. The glowstone on her shoulder illuminated a sharp, impatient scowl. "Is there a secret," Ella mocked, "that you're afraid of being overheard by us, outsiders?" Chesvia stiffened, quickly releasing Benjamin's armor. She tried to sound composed, claiming she was merely expressing moderate nervousness. Benjamin chimed in, calling her a coward to appease Ella's irritation. The tension flared as Chesvia and Ella traded barbs, Chesvia sharp-tongued despite her fear, reminding the group that her professional skills were the only reason she wasn't currently sipping tea by a warm fireplace. The tunnel tightened. The four of them were forced to crawl through the cold, suffocating dust. To break the silence, Ella asked Benjamin about his letters to the capital. Benjamin admitted the truth. He couldn't rally a rescue army. The lords were too terrified to leave their own lands. But he added with a sly edge, "I mentioned the Pale Church was watching. No one ignores those church lunatics." Suddenly, Calvin raised a clenched fist. "Quiet," he commanded. "The end is just ahead." They stepped out onto a ledge overlooking a chilling, dark void. Calvin tossed a stone. 1, 2, 3. A faint asterisk tap echoed from the abyss. Chesvia's face went pale. "You aren't jumping, are you?" Calvin didn't answer her. He simply looked at Benjamin and said, "You brought her, you're responsible for her." Then, without a word, he stepped into the darkness and vanished. Ella followed with a smirk and a wave, leaping like a flickering flame into the pit. Only Benjamin and the trembling Chesvia remained. "Safety measures," she gasped. "Ropes, zip lines." Benjamin grinned, a look Chesvia found truly devilish. He secured a climbing rope to a ridge, but instead of a slow descent, he grabbed her waist with irresistible force. "Hold on tight." He didn't wait for her scream. He pushed off the ledge, plunging them both into the endless, weightless black. Chesvia's terrified shriek shattered the silence of the deep. Her hands locked around his neck in a desperate, white-knuckled grip. "Lady Ella has landed safely." Ella's voice echoes through the hollow underground, her tone dripping with pride. But above, there is no applause, only the hesitant muttering of Chesvia and Benjamin's distracted replies from the cave entrance. The silence is shattered by a scream, a sound so shrill it could make the very rock walls crumble. Ella watches with satisfaction as Benjamin descends from the sky, carrying a white furred accessory, the terrified Chesvia. They land heavily, the echoes of her scream far more rewarding than any praise. Benjamin releases the girl, who staggers to her feet, her face paler than her white hair. She glares at him, teeth gritted. "Next time, let me prepare myself first." Of course, Benjamin agrees insincerely, patting the rope they will need for their eventual escape. But the bickering stops instantly. Calvin, standing at the forefront with his miner's lamp, speaks in a voice like deep stone. "Something's been attracted by the sound. Get ready." Chesvia pales further. "Do I need to apologize for my scream?" Ella draws her rapier with a sharp asterisk whoosh asterisk. The blade gleams with a dangerous, crystalline light. "Personally," she whispers, licking her lips, "I'd love to hear it again. It's more invigorating than a war horn." The two girls begin to trade barbs about a tattered blanket and a certain messy incident from the day before, but the humor is cut short. Calvin turns to Benjamin, his eyes scanning the brand-new longsword at the Lord's waist. "Benjamin, how long has it been since you've seriously practiced?" Benjamin checks his crossbow, a half-smile on his face. "Have you ever seen Frosttown at 4 in the morning, Calvin? While the town sleeps, I am at the training ground." Suddenly, a tremor, the sound of 1,000 tiny footsteps scraping against the rock. Ella hurls luminescent stones into the dark like flares. The white light reveals dozens of pairs of cold, inhuman eyes, hybrid insects. They crawl from every crevice, hissing with malice. 64, Benjamin says calmly, his spiritual perception spreading like radar, and the number is growing. Calvin doesn't hesitate. He flicks his wrist, decapitating a sneaking monster in one fluid motion. Then let's deal with this trash. He steps forward and draws a casual arc in the dirt with his sword. The moment the circle is complete, an invisible force field heavy as a mountain descends. This is Heaven's Collapse asterisk. The insects rushing the line are instantly crushed, their shells shattering under the weight of a god's mercy. Not to be outdone, Ella lets out a low shout. The air around her superheats. Metal ornaments on her clothes melt into glowing, crimson liquid, swirling around her like lethal rose petals. Anything that touches the asterisk-dissolving rose is incinerated into smoke. Benjamin holds the rear, his crossbow firing with mechanical precision while his sword parries every stray claw. Chesvia, hiding behind him, nudges his bow. CK, hey, look at them, use a cool move, where are your special effects, show some majesty. Benjamin ducks a leaping monster, firing a bolt into its eye. He looks back at her, completely helpless. Chesvia, I want to, but the problem is, my role is support. As the last hybrid insect monster convulsed and fell to the ground with a clean strike from Benjamin, the cave fell silent. Benjamin closed his eyes, extending his perception like invisible tentacles. It's safe for now, he nodded. Nothing within range. Chesvia covered her nose, her face pale. Does anyone need treatment, aside from the psychological trauma caused by this smell? Ella flicked her crystal rapier, the dark ichor evaporating in the blade's intense heat. She tried to look relaxed, but her steps faltered. I'm fine, she whispered, her head throbbing from the mental strain of her blade of thought asterisk. Without a word, Chesvia grabbed Ella's wrist. Translucent threads stitched a scratch on Ella's hand, but as the light shifted, the stabbing pain in Ella's head vanished. Even Chesvia looked surprised. Seeing Calvin's probing gaze, however, Chesvia quickly straightened her back, adopting a mysterious expression that said, "Of course, I intended to do that." The group moved onward, entering a dusty, artificial corridor. Benjamin wiped a wall-mounted board, revealing a floor plan. Translator, he gestured to Chesvia, it's your turn. Chesvia traced the map, dormitories, nutrient rooms, and here the main control room. Calvin didn't wait. He walked to the nearest door and kicked it with a heavy asterisk thud. As the lock deformed, a sickle-shaped limb lunged through the crack. Calvin dodged, his sword piercing the monster's vitals in one fluid motion. He kicked the door open to reveal a simple room with rotten fabric and dusty glasses. From there, the team became a highly efficient demolition crew. Ella acted as a human cutting torch, melting through metal locks with her palms. Benjamin served as a living radar, marking targets through walls. Calvin was the executioner, eliminating every marked monster with ruthless precision. Chesvia followed behind, scavenging. She pulled 2 notebooks from a cabinet. Diaries? Ella asked, curious. Chesvia rolled her eyes and read aloud. Starry day. Alice went to the lab with that pretty boy Carlos again. I hate him and I hate these ugly embryos. She flipped a page. Smoggy day. Bribery successful. Got a transfer to waste disposal. Praised the greedy supervisor. Ella burst out laughing. Even Benjamin's lips curled into a smile as they walked, listening to the ancient, petty gossip of a dead civilization. Finally, they reached a colossal metal door. Benjamin sensed the air. The space behind is large, many life forms, and they are stronger than the others. Ella cracked her knuckles, her eyes igniting. She pressed her palms to the cold surface. Who cares what's inside? The metal turned crimson, melting like butte. Are under her touch. Ella used the fuse command to melt a charred hole in the heavy metal door, large enough for 4 people to pass through. Immediately, a pungent mixture of chemical reagents and the sour stench of rotting organic matter wafted out. The 4 companions stepped inside and paused. They stood in a vast chamber where the floor was laid out in a neat grid. Within each square sat a sunken pool filled with bubbling green liquid. At the center of the room stood 3 massive, flesh-colored sacks resembling magnified animal ovaries, their surfaces covered in thick, pulsating veins. Every few moments, a twisted, newborn creature would slide from an opening and fall into the green liquid below. Heh, Ella sneered, her crystal rapier illuminating the dark. Looks like we found the mother of these monsters. Benjamin's pupils contracted. He recognized that liquid. He quickly established a private psychic link with Chesvia. Chesvia, do you see that? Does it look familiar? Chesvia responded with a hint of feverish excitement. I can't forget it, it's the same composition as the sample from the mountains. Benjamin, if I can get enough of this, I can convert it into controllable growth promoters. This might be our biggest achievement yet. But the area was not peaceful. The newborns began hissing, struggling out of the pools to surround them. The team fought through the swarm, but as they approached the central ovaries, a colossal creature, the size of an earth dragon, rose from the largest pool. Its body was covered in thick, protruding scales that leaked yellowish-green pus. My eyes, Chesvia cried, shielding her gaze from the visual horror. Did the designer of this thing have a grudge against the entire world? Benjamin spotted a weakness. Galvin attacked the leg joints. With 2 precise flashes of Galvin's sword, the monster's legs were severed. As it crashed down, its armor plates exploded like a biological bomb, spraying pus and shrapnel everywhere. Benjamin dove backward, barely avoiding the nauseating spray. Together, he and Galvin relentlessly stabbed the beast until it finally stopped convulsing. Moving cautiously, they passed through a staff canteen, where Benjamin noted a device that looked remarkably like an old-fashioned microwave, before finally reaching their target, the main control room. The walls were lined with blackened glass panels and rusted consoles. Chesvia pounced on the decaying documents scattered across the floor, her eyes wide with discovery. As she began to decipher the flamboyant slogans on the walls, the team realized that the information hidden in these dusty records would be their greatest reward of all. The control room was deathly silent, save for the rustling of Chesvia's fingers tracing the dusty consoles. Finally, she straightened up with a long, heavy sigh, her expression a twisted mask of understanding and absurdity. I have figured it out, she announced, her voice cut. Ing through the stillness. The core objective of this 7th resurrection facility was never biological warfare. Their goal was resurrection. She turned to face Calvin, Ella, and Benjamin, who stood further away, examining a strange device on the wall. Chesvia explained that the ancient wizards sought to bring back their brethren who had perished when the concept of magic itself began to fade. The goddess of magic was losing her sanity, Chesvia continued. And as she transformed, the power of the wizards dissipated. But the researchers realized that magic did not simply vanish. It transformed, like ice melting into water. They believed the souls of the dead were preserved within dust crystals, this green liquid, the insect monsters. They were merely byproducts, experimental vessels designed to host re-injected consciousness. Ella stood in stunned silence. I have never seen this in any history book, she whispered. Calvin, ever vigilant, tightened his grip on his sword. The history of the kingdom of Lingfeng was written by the victors, he said grimly. The Pale Church helped establish our kingdom, and they selectively decide what the world is allowed to remember. Ella began to tease Calvin for his unexpected depth, but her smile vanished. She noticed Benjamin standing 5 paces away, his back turned, his body stiff. Benjamin, Ella called out, what do you think of these mad wizards? Benjamin didn't turn, his voice was thin, laced with a rare, trembling uncertainty. I feel like something is watching me. There is nothing here but dust, Chesvia countered, though her eyes narrowed. No, Benjamin whispered, slowly turning his pale face toward them. It is a gaze that affects the consciousness directly. It just appeared, and it gives me the creeps. Calvin instantly drew his longsword, his eyes scanning the shadows like searchlights. Benjamin, do not move, back away toward me, slowly. But Benjamin remained frozen. His eyes grew vacant, staring into the darkness as his lips moved in a silent, invisible conversation. Benjamin, Chesvia shouted, sensing a sudden, cold dread. If you can hear me, put your hands above your head now. Benjamin did not react. He stood like a puppet on strings, his body turning toward his friends with an unnatural, mechanical stiffness. Then, in a blur of motion, his hand gripped his hilt. The blade flashed in the cold light, swinging in a lethal, horizontal arc toward Calvin's throat. Benjamin was woken by a gentle, careful touch on his arm. A worried voice pulled him from a chaotic state of mind. You slept through the entire math class. He looked up, his vision blurring before focusing on his deskmate. She was exquisite, long, flowing, dark blue hair, skin almost translucent, and eyes as still as a tranquil lake. Her voice had an ethereal quality, as if it flowed directly from a screen. Benjamin's head felt heavy, dizzy. He mumbled about a dream so long and real that its ending felt like a piece of trash. When his desk mate earnestly offered an apology, Benjamin waved it off. Then suddenly he stood up with such force that his chair hit the floor with a loud bang asterisk. Ignoring the startled looks of his teacher and peers, he walked straight for the door. "Where are you going?" she asked, following him into the corridor with the light movements of a cat. "Go home," he replied. He didn't care about the physics class or the self-study period ahead. He simply asked, "Do you want to come back with me?" He didn't wait for an answer. He knew she would follow. They stepped out into the afternoon sun, past the bicycle bells and food stalls, and caught an old blue taxi. Inside, the driver droned on about gas prices and his son's grades. Benjamin chimed in, arguing playfully about the best flavor of instant noodles, soaking in the mundane reality. When they arrived at a familiar, weathered apartment complex, Benjamin's heart quickened. He led his silent companion up to Unit 402. He turned the key. Click. Inside, the air smelled of cooking oil and home. His mother looked out from the kitchen, a spatula in hand. Benjamin walked over and hugged her tightly, a gesture that made his blue-haired companion widen her eyes in surprise. "What's gotten into you?" his mother laughed, before warmly welcoming the classmate and rushing to prepare a lavish fish dinner. But as his mother returned to the kitchen, Benjamin's smile vanished. He poked at his rice and spoke in a low, calm voice. "I won't hold it against you, forcing me into this nostalgic experience." He looked directly at the girl. "I knew it was fake from the first moment I saw you." He reached out, touching a strand of her shimmering blue hair. In an ordinary high school, a student with this hair color would have their parents called in immediately. You pursued beauty, but you ignored rationality. The entity inhabiting the girl's form nodded slowly. "I will remember that." She paused. "Is this not what you most want to be immersed in?" "There is nothing wrong with illusion," Benjamin said firmly, "but I want more, and you can't give me that." "We will meet again," the entity whispered, "soon." Suddenly, the world began to flicker like a dying television screen. His mother's voice became hollow and distant as the walls cracked and faded. The warmth of the sun was replaced by a cold, biting detachment. The illusion was collapsing, and Benjamin was left alone in the void. Benjamin opened his eyes to find Calvin's face inches from his own, and Calvin's hand gripping his shoulder with the strength of an iron clamp. Beside him, Ella pressed down on his other arm. Her crystal rapier was sheathed, but the wariness in her eyes remained. Chesvia squatted before him, waving a bottle of pungent stimulant and grinning. "Enjoying being crazy, Barren? Did you bring back any local specialties?" "Are you sure he's awake?" Ella asked suspiciously. The way he slashed Calvin just now, it didn't seem like sleepwalking. Chesvia rolled her eyes. "Don't question a seasoned madman, Lord Pascal. Last time I went mad, I nearly tore the administrative center to the ground." "She's right," Benjamin groaned, stretching his numb shoulders. Calvin and Ella exchanged a glance before slowly releasing their grip. Calvin stepped back, his gaze fixed on the deep slash Benjamin's sword had carved into his chest armor. "Your swordsmanship has improved," Calvin noted, his blue eyes flashing with surprise. "The angle, the speed. If I hadn't retreated, that strike would have caused real trouble." Benjamin dusted off his leather armor with a self-deprecating smile. "Maybe I'm just 3 times stronger after being corrupted. My body was controlled by something, but my potential was unleashed. Sorry about the armor, Calvin." "It's all right," Calvin replied shortly. "But what happened? You fell into a hallucination and attacked us. It's bizarre." "I want to know too," Benjamin muttered, looking around the cold control room. "One second I'm listening to ancient gossip, the next, I'm in another place with a blue-haired girl." Chesvia chimed in. "It's your Nen blade. It's like a radio tuned to the wrong frequency. You're picking up signals from abnormal ranges." She pointed to a stack of documents on the console. "As for the girl, you were likely having a friendly social interaction with the wizard's goddess." "Goddess?" Benjamin and Ella gasped in unison. "While you were away," I kept reading, Chesvia explained, flipping through the papers. "The purpose of this 7th resurrection facility wasn't just to save wizards. They were researching how to resurrect the goddess of magic herself." Ella interrupted. "But you said she just went mad, not that she died." "Lady Ella," Chesvia smiled thinly, "to a wizard, what is the difference between a goddess who is insane, causing the foundation of your power to crumble, and a dead goddess?" These lunatics decided it was easier to resurrect a new, obedient goddess than to heal the old one. A chill ran down Benjamin's spine. You mean, they tried to create a controllable god? Exactly, Chesvia pointed to a series of obscure charts. They literally divided the goddess into 9 parts, conducting research in 9 separate facilities to reconstruct her. Ella gasped, and even Calvin's brow furrowed in horror. But wait, Chesvia's tone turned deadly serious. That isn't even the most exciting part. I've been comparing the coordinates of the other facilities. She took a deep breath, looking intently at Benjamin. The first revival facility, the one that achieved the greatest success in resurrecting the goddess, is located directly beneath the current capital of the Kingdom of Linfeng. One by one, the group ascended the sturdy rope, escaping the bottomless cave. As the cold, fresh air rushed into his lungs, Calvin took a deep breath, letting the wind carry away the stench of viscous green liquid, charred monsters, and the suffocating history of the ruins. Nearby, in a small tent at the mountain crevice, Bishop Aphrodite huddled into a ball, clutching a small heater. Inside, 5 people gathered around a stove where a kettle of herbal tea simmered. Chesvia sipped her drink, her voice tinged with pride. I didn't go crazy down there, she boasted. My willpower must be unyielding. Benjamin glanced at her dryly, or perhaps the goddess simply didn't have time for you. As they recounted the horrors below, the exploding earth dragons and the madness of a dismembered goddess, the bishop's hands began to tremble. To divide a deity 9 times, he whispered, what blasphemy. Ella looked at Benjamin, her expression grave. I will use the Pascal family channels to spread this news, this disaster. It involves the gods themselves. Benjamin poked the fire, watching the sparks dance. Outside, the spring snow was only getting heavier. If this makes the nobles stop their infighting, it is for the best, he said. If this snow doesn't stop, hunger and panic will destroy us long before the monsters do. He turned to Calvin. I will inform the prince. I hope your loyalty to the princess won't cloud your judgment if we must work together. Calvin's blue eyes remained clear. I am no reckless swordsman, Benjamin. I will monitor the capital and share intelligence. Protecting order is more interesting than quelling rebellions. The tent fell silent. Suddenly Calvin stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow. He walked toward Benjamin and stopped. You have governed Frosttown well, Calvin said slowly. Then the corner of his mouth twitched, a rare, fleeting smile. I thought I would never say this, but you really caught up with me, Benjamin Blackwood. Without another word, Calvin stepped out into the howling white curtain of the storm. Benjamin sat back, staring into the embers. I never imagined, he murmured, that he would finally take me seriously. Ella tilted her head. Was it truly that bad before? Before, Benjamin smiled, his eyes reflecting the firelight. I was just a handyman or a lucky baron. But now, in his eyes, I am finally just me. After seeing Calvin off, Ella remained in Frosttown for one more day, not for rest, but to finalize a secret alliance with Benjamin. In a quiet, private room, the atmosphere shifted from friendly warmth to the sharp focus of 2 strategists. With a decisive motion, Ella shoved a thick document across the table. The latest achievement from the Hearthstone City blacksmiths, she said, her eyes gleaming with pride. It was the result of 2 months of tireless labor, design drawings for an improved steam engine. Benjamin skimmed the data, his excitement growing. The volume was reduced by 1/3, yet the fuel efficiency was optimized. How did you achieve this miniaturization? He asked, breath. Less. Ella scoffed lightly. It was built with real money and the dark circles under my craftsman's eyes. I even used my mind blade to assist in the high-precision forging. Benjamin nodded, acknowledging the gift. He reached into a cabinet and spread his own blueprints on the table, a human-powered railcar designed for wooden tracks. This, he explained, will revolutionize logistics in your mining territories. He admitted, however, that without the machine tools Ella had previously provided, his own smiths couldn't have built it. As they spoke, Ella studied Benjamin. He was radiating energy, full of fighting spirit. Her own tone suddenly dropped. She leaned back, looking out at the gray sky with a trace of envy. I really envy that mindset, she whispered, knowing exactly where to go next. She confessed that after seizing control of Ironforge, she felt lost, as if she had climbed a mountain only to find herself trapped in the mist. Benjamin listened patiently. When she teased him about his own lack of confusion, he joked that his greatest struggle was deciding what to eat for dinner. The tension broke. Ella laughed but then looked at him with newfound resolve. "If you can find the way forward," she said softly, "I'll just follow you and see." Once Ella departed, Benjamin turned his focus to the 7th Resurrection Facility. Under his orders, Walter and a squad of soldiers began clearing the interior of dangerous hybrid insectoids. Chesvia led the way, her eyes wide with scientific greed. To her, the facility wasn't a tomb, it was a treasure. "Get your spirits up," she shouted to the nervous soldiers. "We are exploring the legacy of an ancient civilization. Just try not to touch anything that glows." Benjamin usually sleeps in the administrative center, but tonight, he chose to go home. Ever since a haunting hallucination at the 7th Resurrection Facility, where a god-stern zombie forced him to confront his deepest memories, Benjamin has felt a strange, melancholy pull toward the concept of family. He tries to tell himself he is lucky. He exists in 2 worlds, with 2 sets of parents, and 2 lives that run like parallel rivers never crossing. Yet the loss of his past life still aches. He cannot numb the grief of one world with the comforts of the other. Inside the house, the air is warm. His mother, Anna, and his sister, Sarah, are busy in the kitchen. To pass the time, Benjamin sits at the table and teases his little sister, Marie, with math problems. He starts with simple addition, then moves to complex geometry. Poor Marie is soon scratching her head in total confusion. The tension breaks when Sarah brings out a massive bowl of steaming stew. She sits beside Benjamin, stiff and formal. When he asks how her work is going under the official, Sullivan, she responds like she's giving a military report. "Relax, Sarah," Benjamin laughs. "We're just chatting." Sarah relaxes slightly and shares a story. A few days ago, a woman named Chesvia asked the exhausted Sullivan what magical power he would want if he could awaken a blade of thought. Since Sullivan was half asleep, Sarah answered for him. She suggested the power to never need sleep and to always be full of energy. Benjamin nods, smiling. That sounds exactly like something Sullivan would want, a godsend tailor-made for a workaholic. Suddenly, the door swings open. His father, Old Blackwood, and his eldest brother, Rang, stomp in from the cold. His father is shivering, proudly holding a frozen fish he caught just for Benjamin's visit. As they eat, the conversation turns to the past. They remember the hard years, the wilted crops, and the young master lord who lowered their taxes after the old lord died. Benjamin listens, realizing that this same young lord will likely join his alliance soon. The table is full of simple food: bread, fish soup, and pickled turnips. His mother speaks fondly of his other sisters who have already married and moved away. In this moment, surrounded by the steam of the stew and the low hum of his family's voices, the heavy burdens of Baron Blackwood finally begin to fade. Alkea sat behind a heavy wooden table, his eyes tracing the letters scattered before him. They all hummed the same tune: a temporary truce, a pause for the snowstorm, a joint effort to deal with the unusual events in the capital. "Dealing with Conrad's affairs," Alkea murmured, his voice dripping with disdain. "How easy it sounds." He pushed aside the vague diplomatic fluff of the high nobles, reaching instead for a direct, chilling report from Baron Benjamin Blackwood of Frosttown. Unlike the others, Blackwood spoke of catastrophic consequences and the collapse of the kingdom's foundations. To Alkea, the words of a frontier baron carried far more weight than the hollow rhetoric of the court. He looked up at Charles, the Grand Duke of the West. "The Pascals, the Earl of Ironrock, they all want me to stop. What do you think I'll decide?" Charles paused, choosing his words with care. "Your Highness, you will agree to the truce. You might even offer troops to deal with Prince Conrad." The Duke laid out the logic. External threats from orcs and elves are circling like hyenas, and Alkea needs the moral high ground. By rescuing the capital before Princess Celia can act, Alkea would steal her reputation and win the hearts of the people. Alkea offered a cold, thin smile. "You're right, Charles. Mostly I will call a truce. But do those opportunists in the court have the guts to let my army in?" His fingers tapped the map. "If they refuse, I brand them traitors who abandon the people. If they agree," he pressed his finger firmly onto the capital. "Once an army enters, it does not simply leave. The royal domain will change hands before Celia even realizes what has happened." As Charles withdrew to prepare the declarations, Alkea stared into the fire plaque. His decision wasn't just about politics, it was about a secret. Years ago, he had glimpsed forbidden scrolls of the ancient empire of wizards, until the Pale Church showed him the madness hidden behind those doors. He knew now that his foolish brother Conrad had opened one. "I was not ruthless enough," Alkea whispered, watching the unnatural blizzard howl outside. He regretted sparing Conrad after their father's death. He had let royal dignity stay his hand, and now a nightmare was waking in the heart of the kingdom. Celia gazed at the pale, fine snowflakes, falling silently with an air of unfamiliarity. It never snows in the Southern Territory, and yet here it was. She wondered what this omen would bring. Famine, death. Her thoughts drifted toward the worst possible outcomes, a habit she had found impossible to break since arriving in this damp, hostile quagmire. At first, there was a glimmer of hope. The Grand Duke had welcomed her with earnest words, pleading for her help against lizard men and elven rangers. Ambitious and eager to prove her strength for the coming struggle for the throne, Celia accepted. She led her small force through sweltering rainforests and rugged mountains, winning victory after victory. But with every report of success, the Grand Duke only presented more problems. She was trapped. She realized now that she was nothing more than a sharp sword, a tool used by the Duke to solve minor troubles he was too cheap to handle himself. She tried to do more. She improved patrol routes and trained her soldiers, but it felt like fighting a vast swamp. Her efforts splashed a few specks of mud, only to be swallowed by the gloom. In the silence, her self-doubt surged. She shed the mask of the princess and looked at her true self. Was she truly capable of governing a kingdom? She had believed that a lofty goal would create its own path, but now she saw only a maze of forks, and she was directionally challenged. Without her companions, she felt capable of nothing. On her table sat a letter from Benjamin, sealed with frostbite wax. It lay next to several other unanswered messages. She knew his tone would be gentle and rational, but she could not bring herself to reply. What could she say? That she was failing, that she was further from the throne than ever. A guard's voice suddenly broke the silence. "Your Highness, the Grand Duke requests your presence. There is a new situation." "I will go," she replied, her eyes filled with a weary frenzy. Meanwhile, far away in the administrative center, Benjamin sat before several priceless contracts. More and more lords were joining his commune. Frosttown was becoming a magnet, pulling resources from every corner of the land. He looked over the documents, already considering his next move, selling improved seeds to the surrounding territories. Seeds that would only last for 1 or 2 generations. Benjamin awoke to a suffocating weight and a voice that was hoarse, wrong, and nothing like Chesvia's usual tone. In the pitch-black bedroom of Frosttown, the only light came from the crimson pupils hovering inches from his face. Cold fingers gripped his throat, not to kill, but to command. Benjamin remained unnervingly calm. He didn't struggle, he simply relaxed his neck and asked, "What are you trying to tell me?" A hiss scraped against his eardrums, dripping with ancient anger. "Stop, dawdling, kill that woman who came back from the dead. Right now, I am giving you that power." The voice roared with contempt, warning him not to trust the Pale Church or the disobedient idiots who followed it. As Benjamin gasped for air, the crimson eyes suddenly went out like dying embers. The weight lifted. A weak, bewildered voice, the real Chesvia, whispered in the dark, Should I scream?" "Girl," Benjamin sighed, rubbing his bruised neck, "the one who should be calling for help is me. Now get off my bed, unless you plan on staying." A flurry of rustling and a muffled thud followed as the terrified girl scrambled away into the shadows. Meanwhile, high above the capital, the blizzard paused. 2 griffin riders, Maltz and Beck, soared over the kingdom's heart, but the scene below froze their blood. The city was a nightmare of stiff, puppet-like figures biting and shoving in the streets. Near the palace, a gray-white mist swirled, hiding massive, writhing shadows. "What are we even observing?" Beck shouted over the wind. They saw Knights of the Pale Church besieged by monsters, skinned, dog-like beasts and guards sprouting black tentacles from their armor. Maltz urged his griffin lower, desperate to reach the East Bell Tower. But as they descended, 3 enormous, eyeless birds burning with black and white flames tore through the mist to intercept them. The sky erupted into a frantic aerial battle. Maltz pierced the skull of one beast, watching it dissolve into ash, but a third predator struck from his blind spot. Its talons shredded his griffin's wing. Beck screamed his comrade's name, but it was too late. Maltz and his mount spiraled downward, vanishing into the hungry, gray fog of the ruined city below. A violent impact, the roar of shattering wood, the crash of collapsing stone, then silence. Maltz struggled to surface from a sea of pain. Beneath him, he felt cold gravel and rough wood chips. A sharp, excruciating agony in his left leg made his vision go black. He was alive, but his heart sank as he turned his head. Nearby, his loyal companion, his griffin, lay crushed beneath the ruins of a house. Its beautiful brown feathers were matted with blood, its amber eyes were devoid of luster. The proud king of the skies had used its own body to shield Maltz from the fall. Now it was only exhaling, not inhaling. Maltz groaned, struggling to crawl toward his friend, but the sound of footsteps stopped him. A discordant, sluggish shuffling came from the streets. Faces appeared in the ruins, human yet empty. Their eyes were lifeless, their movements like puppets with rusted joints. As they pounced, Maltz gripped his cavalry short sword, bracing for a final stand. Suddenly, streaks of golden light flashed through the air like fine spider silk. The attackers froze, their bodies sliced apart by invisible, razor-sharp cables. "Are you still conscious?" A man named Sokka dropped from a nearby roof. He was a chosen one. With a focused gaze, he used glowing golden threads from his fingertips to stitch Maltz's mangled leg, halting the heavy bleeding. "Get on," Sokka commanded, offering his back. "I'll carry you." But Maltz hesitated. He looked at his dying griffin one last time. "It will be over soon, my friend," he choked out. With a trembling hand, he drove his blade into the creature's neck, a final act of mercy. Sokka carried Maltz through the city, navigating hidden paths with uncanny speed. He explained the grim reality. The capital had become a walled city. No one, not knights nor thieves, could escape. They reached a heavy stone slab, which Sokka moved with ease, revealing a dark staircase. Below, in a murky, candlelit cellar, Maltz found a desperate gathering. 20 survivors huddled together, knights of rival houses and even tattered members of the Pale Church. "Who are they?" Maltz whispered. A wounded knight with a severed arm laughed bitterly. "Just like you, pieces of trash," he dragged back from some damned corner. As the heat of infection began to burn in his leg, Maltz asked for a doctor. The knight simply pointed to a priest praying fervently in the shadows. "You'd better pray too," the man sneered. "Maybe a miracle will heal us all." Inside his office in Frosttown, Benjamin's voice carries a sharp, impatient edge. He is lecturing unseen lords about the technicalities of honeycomb briquettes, insisting they cannot be shaped like roses, when suddenly he freezes. On the map of his consciousness, a faint, flickering spark of light returns to life. He is reconnected with Bishop Sokka, deep within the capital. "Baron, it is always a pleasure to hear your voice," Sokka whispers. His tone is ethereal, muffled, as if speaking through heavy velvet curtains. Benjamin doesn't miss a beat. "No need for formalities. Your signal is abysmal. After 3 days of silence, I nearly told Aphrodite to start planning your funeral." The humor is a mask for his genuine worry. Sokka's light is as dim as a candle in a gale. The bishop's reply is grim. He describes the capital as a total prison, a place where only those entering can leave. He warns that Prince Conrad is on the verge of success. Benjamin quickens his pace, his mind racing. He reveals his horrifying discovery from the 7th Resurrection Facility, the ancient witch empire's plan to resurrect a controllable goddess of magic. He theorizes that Conrad is either possessed by the goddess's lingering madness or is a vessel for her partial rebirth. This, he explains, is the true source of the unnatural, bone-chilling winter. Sokka is stunned into a heavy silence. He confirms that the capital is in chaos. Factions, especially the fanatical Pale Church, are throwing themselves into the city like moths to a flame. Through Sokka's eyes, Benjamin sees a desolate underground shelter filled with wounded soldiers and numb, praying cultists. Sokka's voice dips with frustration. His attempt at a united survivors plan has failed. The fanatics either ignore him or attack him as if he were a monster. But then Benjamin spots a figure in the corner of the vision. A soldier in battered silver armor. It is one of Calvin's Griffin riders. Sokka identifies him as Maltz. The knight is fading, his leg shattered, his griffin dead. Sokka rouses him and Maltz gasps out a terrifying report. From the air, he saw the city walls. The inhuman creatures aren't just staying in the capital. They are swarming outward. "They are leaving the city," Sokka's voice tightens with sudden dread. "The outlying towns, the common people, they are completely unprepared." Benjamin feels a surge of cold adrenaline. "I know," he says, trying to steady his own consciousness. "I will handle it, but Sokka, look after your people. I will find a way to get medical supplies to you, somehow." Benjamin's forehead was slick with sweat. Maintaining the psychic link with Sokka's blade was like grasping a slippery rope in a violent storm. He could not let go. "Summon Chesvia and Evelyn." Immediately, he barked to the guards. When they arrived, Benjamin didn't even open his eyes. His mind was already miles away, deep within the capital. "Chesvia, I need your medical expertise remotely. Evelyn, record this dictation. Send it to Calvin and every nearby lord. Mark it, most urgent." The room became a frantic command center. Benjamin acted as a living bridge, a megaphone across the void. He relayed Chesvia's sharp, professional questions to the distant Sokka. "Wound location, size, is there pus, swelling?" Chesvia's voice rained down like a machine gun. Benjamin's voice strained as he translated the grim reality. "Open fracture, palm-sized laceration, bone exposed. The color is dark red to black, yellowish-green edges." Through the link, Sokka used his Nen blade with the precision of a master surgeon, cutting away necrotic tissue under Chesvia's distant guidance. It was an agonizing, miraculous operation, but when it was over, Chesvia's face fell. "It is a temporary measure," she whispered. "They won't survive more than a few days in that environment." Benjamin's response was ruthless, born of cold necessity. "Their lives were never the primary objective. We need a direct line to Calvin for a Griffin airdrop." Desperate, they summoned Bishop Aphrodite and the energetic Masku from the Lingyuan church. Benjamin skipped the pleasantries. He needed a miracle of communication. "Understood, Masku D. Eclaired, we have a brother near Stone Cliff territory. I guarantee to deliver your message faster than a carrier hawk." Benjamin hastily scribbled a note, details only he and Calvin knew, to serve as a secret password. As the church members rushed to help, Aphrodite warned that the other denominations were stirring for a holy war, but they were moving far too slowly. Meanwhile, at Stone Cliff, Lord Calvin stood on his terrace, the cold wind whipping his face. He held a letter from the Grand Duke of the North, a polite demand to let the Northern Army march through his lands. "Invite a wolf into the house," Calvin sneered. He knew it was a trap. Just then, his captain of the guard interrupted. "My lord, a man is outside, a Bishop Camus from the Church of the Spirit Garden. He says he has an urgent message from the Baron of Frosttown." Calvin froze. "Bring him in." The travel-worn bishop entered, his eyes bright with purpose. "I have come by divine inspiration," Camus stated firmly, "to deliver a message from Benjamin." The icy wind high above felt like countless blades slicing through Calvin's skin. He lay nestled against the warm back of his griffin, his body trembling, not just from the cold, but from the lingering frustration of his encounter with the Bishop Camus. Calvin's mind drifted back to the fortress. He had merely muttered that Camus sounded like a man's name, and the bishop had snapped. The air had frozen, frost formed on Calvin's armor as Camus lunged with a terrifying, unnatural agility. Calvin had narrowly dodged a strike that would have frozen his flesh solid, countering only with a sharp blow to the wrist. The bishop had eventually stormed off, leaving Calvin shaken and wary of anyone with a soft-sounding name. A gesture from Vice Commander Letzo broke his reverie. Below, a mountain ridge fortress appeared. Calvin signaled for the forces to split. Letzo would take 10 nights to clear the ravines of dead-born monsters, while Calvin led the main force toward the capital. As the city came into view, the sight was haunting. A thick, grayish-white fog swallowed the palace district like dirty cotton wool. There was no smoke, no flags, only a deathly, throbbing silence. "Maintain altitude," Calvin commanded. "Prepare for the airdrop." Suddenly, the fog surged. Dozens of black dots tore into the sky, giant birds wreathed in eerie black-and white flames. "Enemy attack," Calvin roared. "Supply carriers retreat, first and second squads, on me." The 10 elite griffins formed a tight wedge, charging headlong into the flock. At the last second, Calvin shouted, "Disperse!" The knights scattered like exploding fireworks, causing the enemy to overshoot. Seizing the moment, the riders hurled short spears with lethal precision. Screeches filled the air as 10 of the flaming beasts plummeted to the earth. But the victory was short-lived. The fog boiled and a shadow far larger emerged. A dragon, not a living one, but a legendary beast resurrected from the grave. Its scales were rotted, revealing festering muscle and white bone, its eyes burning with that same cold, necrotic flame. The dead dragon was impervious to pain. As morale wavered and the griffins tired, Calvin made a desperate choice. "Take me up," he urged his mount. The griffin soared vertically. At the apex, Calvin leaped. He unleashed his spiritual energy, pouring every ounce of weight and power into his heavy greatsword. He became a silver meteor, slicing through the air and severing the dragon's wing at the shoulder. As the beast spiraled downward, Calvin plummeted. He shifted his energy, becoming light as a feather, allowing his griffin to swoop in and catch him midair. Swinging back into the saddle, he looked toward the city. "Drop the supplies," he commanded. "Drop them on the roof." Deep within the eastern frontier, inside the formidable Ironrock castle, the aged Earl Ironrock sat upon a throne of bearskin. His face, a roadmap of past battles, twisted into a sneer as he tossed a letter onto the heavy oak table. "Dragon," he scoffed, his voice sharp as an eagle's cry. He looked toward his eldest son, Gallio, a man of calm composure and aristocratic grace, and mocked his younger son Calvin's desperate plea for help as a mere bedtime story. Gallio stepped forward, his voice a steady anchor. He warned his father that the kingdom was fracturing, that Princess Celia was failing to contain the north and west, and that if Ironrock remained idle, the capital would surely fall. The Earl tapped the table, his mind weighing the cost of peace against the shifting tides of power. He had no desire to leave his warm fireside and aged wines for another war, until the heavy doors burst open. A panicked officer stumbled in, his voice trembling with fear. "My lord, an unidentified army has breached the border. They have already destroyed 3 villages in our territory." The air in the hall froze. The only sound remaining was the frantic crackling of the fireplace. Meanwhile, near the capital, Calvin stood over a sheepskin map in a cold fortress. His deputy, Letho, delivered grim news. The deathborn, monstrous, undead entities had split into 6 groups and were carving a path of destruction across the land. They weren't wandering aimlessly, they were being *directed. Calvin barked orders to fortify the passes, his brow furrowed with the weight of command. He learned that a bishop named Camus was gathering followers to fight the evil spirits with prayer and simple barricades. "Don't let them die in vain," Calvin muttered, ordering his men to provide the priests with steel and training instead of sermons. But a new shadow loomed: logistics. With the roads choked by blizzards, greedy nobles were skyrocketing grain prices, threatening to starve his army. When asked if his father would send aid, Calvin received only a vague promise of supplies, but no soldiers. Calvin looked at the map. His gaze landing on Frosttown, a subtle, knowing smile touched his lips. The burden of coin and coordination was too heavy for a soldier, but he knew just the man for the job. "Let Benjamin worry about it," he whispered. "He is good at it, and I bet he won't refuse." The iron-cast collar of Furnaceheart City loomed under a gray sky as a travel-worn griffin knight sent by Lord Calvin strode past the guards. He brought a dire warning: the army of the Deadborn had split. 1 legion was marching straight for Ironforge, and Calvin had personally slain a corrupted dragon over the capital. Lady Ella straightened up, her eyes widening. "What did you say?" she demanded, her voice dripping with suspicion. "What do you mean, Calvin killed a dragon?" From the shadows, the old butler, Clement, coughed softly. "Young lady," he reminded her steadily, "the key point is that the threat is approaching. We must prepare our defenses, immediately." The knight nodded urgently, explaining that while Calvin would intercept the forces threatening the north, he could not stop the monsters heading their way. Ella waved a hand dismissively, though her brow furrowed. "I know what he's saying," she muttered. "But did he have to slip the Dragon Slayer line into an official report? He just wants to show off. I can see him now, wagging his tail like a smug dog." She narrowed her eyes at the embarrassed messenger. "Let me guess. He told you to mention the dragon to the Baron in Frostshire too." In a no-big-deal tone, the knight's silence was a confession. "I knew it," Ella snorted. She ordered the knight to return to Calvin with a message. She had no intention of helping a man with such a deadpan expression. But since he was taking the hits for everyone, she would send a batch of Ironforge's latest equipment. "Don't you dare refuse it," she added sharply. Once the knight departed, Ella's feigned impatience vanished. She turned to Clement with cold precision. "Evacuate the border villages to the city. Tell them it is now a military zone." She then commanded him to contact her mother, Lady Paschal. "Tell her to use the family's influence in the royal territory. And tell her if she continues to dawdle, she should hand the family headship to someone younger." Meanwhile, in the Golden Valley, Lord Lauren faced a different challenge. His reception room was a chaos of bickering merchants arguing over wine quotas and silk prices. They treated him with the casual indifference one affords a peaceful lord. However, Lauren held a letter from Calvin. He knew Calvin was many things, arrogant, stubborn, and cold, but he was no liar. Gentlemen, Lauren's voice cut through the noise. He stood, a mysterious, radiant smile playing on his lips. Put aside your trifles. I have just received news of an unprecedented business opportunity. The room fell silent. In the Golden Valley, a business opportunity from Lauren meant profit. He tapped a spot on the map near the capital, the path of the dead-born. It is time-sensitive, he whispered, his eyes gleaming, and it deserves our full, undivided attention. The griffin from Stonecliff territory descended onto the frozen earth of Frost Town, carrying the weary knight Caesar. He expected a cold reception from a mere captain, but instead he was met by the legendary Baron of Frost Town himself. Benjamin strode forward with a warm smile, grasping Caesar's armored hand before the knight could even dismount. You must be tired, the Baron said softly. Thank you for bringing us this news despite the wind and the danger. Caesar was stunned. Usually a messenger was lucky to receive a bowl of thin soup. He straightened his aching back, stammering that it was merely his duty, but Benjamin simply gestured toward the warmth of the interior. I have had food prepared. Please, come in. As they walked, Caesar froze. Standing behind the Baron was a man in a crisp officer's uniform, a face from his past. Wote, Caesar gasped. The former Griffin knight nodded with a steady smile. Long time no see, Caesar. Your mount will be cared for. Rest now. Inside, the simple dinner was a revelation. The table groaned under the weight of spiced lamb, roasted poultry, and thick vegetable soup, luxuries unheard of in the harsh northern winter. As Caesar ate, the tension left his body, and he recounted the harrowing news from Lord Calvin. When Caesar mentioned that Calvin had personally slain a rotting dragon above the capital, Benjamin's knife paused over his steak. A dragon, he murmured, his voice low with sudden gravity. Even those have appeared. Benjamin did not hesitate. He promised that Frost Town and the United Commune would ensure a continuous flow of supplies to the front lines. He spoke of relay stations in Silver Stream and Grape Valley, his tone resolute. When Caesar mentioned that Lady Ella of Ironforge was also sending advanced weaponry, Benjamin smiled faintly. She never backs down. Calvin will be pleased. But then the smile vanished. I wish I could send troops, Benjamin sighed, but the West is in chaos. Wote stepped forward to explain. 2 days ago, our allies in Blackrock territory were attacked by a coalition of dwarves and elves. The scene shifts to the bloody western frontier. Baron Guise, looking like an enraged bear, swung a massive two-handed greatsword cleaving through armored dwarves. An elven arrow hissed toward his throat, only to be deflected by the steel spear of Diona, a young observer from Frost Town. Lord Guise, you have fought for 2 days, Diona shouted over the din of battle. Fall back. Guise retreated, panting, leaning on his sword as Diona took command. The young man's tactics were flawless, but his heart was cold with dread. He had fought elves before, but these were different. Their natural elegance was gone, replaced by a terrifying mechanical stiffness. And the most impossible sight of all, elves and dwarves fighting side by side. Hold the line, Diona roared against the madness. Do not advance. The final clang of steel fades into a cold twilight wind, leaving only the heavy breathing of the Blackrock territory soldiers. On the blood-stained battlefield, the men begin the grim work of clearing the dead, dragging enemy corpses into pits to stave off disease. Baron Guise, leaning heavily on a grime-stained greatsword, approaches Diona. He claps the young man's shoulder with a hoarse, admiring laugh. Good lad, Guise bellows. I never expected Benjamin to have such a fighter in his ranks. You stabilized the flank. Diona lowers his head humbly. He knows the truth. The sudden cunning ambush by a mixed force of dwarves and elves had caught the border guards off guard. Now, as the main force establishes a perimeter against the jagged silhouette of the Greywhisper Mountains, a tense silence settles over the camp. What now? Diona asks. Guy spits a mouthful of bloody saliva, his eyes gleaming like a wounded beast. We fight back. I don't wait to be beaten twice. I'm going to uproot every tribe in those mountains that dared to extend their claws. The Baron has captured several high-status prisoners, and Diona, sensing a deeper conspiracy, volunteers to assist with the interrogation. Inside a cramped, flickering tent, the air is thick with the stench of sweat and iron. Two prisoners kneel in the dirt, a slender elf and a muscular dwarf, both bound tightly and covered in grime. When the prisoners refuse to speak, Diona steps forward. Having served in the Southern Territory, he is the only one who understands their gibberish. He kneels before the elf, speaking in broken but cold Elvish. "Answer me," he commands. "Why did you attack?" The elf's eyes flicker with a numb gloom. After a sharp, sudden blow to the stomach from Diona, the prisoner finally gasps out a hoarse response. A voice whispered in our ears. It commanded us to take it back. "Take back what?" Diona presses, leaning in. Suddenly, the dwarf prisoner begins to make a horrific, gurgling sound. The elf's pupils contract and black, writhing blood vessels map across his eyes. "Something's wrong," Guys roars, lunging forward to yank Diona back just as the elf's mouth unhinges. A torrent of pale, scorching liquid erupts, hissing against the dirt where Diona stood a second before. "Our creator," the elf screams in a distorted tongue. "He is returning." Skin ripples as if infested by worms, ropes snap. Outside, the camp erupts into chaos as soldiers scream in terror. The corpses, the dead are rising. Guys draws his weapon, shielding Diona from the mutating monsters. "This is," he growls, "incredibly weird." Inside the Lord's office in Frosttown, Benjamin sat before a heavy oak table, buried under a mountain of ledgers. There were orders for honeycomb briquettes from Yingxi County, budget applications for horse-drawn carriages, and his brother's Adis designs for the steam engine. But today, the ink on the pages looked like a swarm of meaningless black insects. His mind was miles away, drifting toward the capital, and the rotting dragon beneath Calvin's sword. The pen hovered, trembling slightly, until the soft scent of honey and gingerbread filled the room. His private secretary and intelligence chief, Evelyn, quietly placed a cup of herbal tea on the desk. She watched him closely, noticing his furrowed brow and unfocused eyes. "My lady," she murmured with concern, "you don't look well. Perhaps you should rest." Benjamin sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's not rest I need, Evelyn. I just cannot concentrate." He took a sip of the bitter tea, trying to steady his nerves. He spoke of the kingdom's fractured state, of Prince Alcia in the north, who held massive power but hesitated to act, fearing he would inherit a ruined throne. "The north is stable for now," Benjamin muttered, tracing the rim of his cup. "But the capital, and this damn, never-ending snow, that is the true crisis." He looked out the window at the white void. He suspected the eerie snowfall was tied directly to the darkness in the capital. Then his voice dropped to a low, uncertain whisper. "Evelyn, I'm worried this is all too simple." Evelyn blinked, confused. "Simple, sir." "The solution," Benjamin explained. "We plan to gather strength, march on the capital, and kill the source. But if our enemy is Prince Conrad, a man capable of resurrecting dragons, would he really just sit in his lair like a foolish demon king, waiting for us to arrive? No, a sane enemy does not wait to be killed." The room fell silent, save for the crackling stove. Evelyn suggested he speak with Miss Chesvia, who was currently deciphering ancient ruins that might offer fresh insight. "You're right," Benjamin said, standing up and stretching his stiff neck. He started toward the door but paused, eyeing the massive pile of unfinished paperwork. He turned back to Evelyn, a mischievous, trusting smile spreading across his face. He patted her shoulder solemnly. "Evelyn, I have such high regard for your abilities." Evelyn's eyes widened. "Sir, I don't like the sound of this." "Nonsense," Benjamin laughed, already grabbing his coat. "You'll handle these documents perfectly, mark the ones you can't finish." He fled the room before she could protest. Left alone with the mountain of ledgers, Evelyn sighed, resigned to her fate. "I hope," she whispered to the empty room, "that he at least brings back some gingerbread." The air in the cramped office was thick with the scent of old parchment and guttering wax. "Chesvia, my dear, diligent, all-powerful Chesvia," Benjamin's voice, a playful, exaggerated aria, drifted into the room before he even crossed the threshold. Chesvia sat amidst a sea of scrawled notes, her hair a bird's nest of frustration. She watched as Benjamin pushed inside, his brow furrowing at the dim light. "Of a single oil lamp, aren't you afraid of ruining your eyes, my lord?" he asked, lighting the spare candles. The warm glow revealed the deep fatigue etched into Chesvia's face and the ink stains marking her skin. "I'm more worried about fire than nearsightedness, boss," she replied weakly, gesturing to the piles of paper. Benjamin pulled up a chair, his expression shifting from playfulness to a sharp, expectant seriousness. "So, my brilliant archaeologist, have you unearthed anything for your anxious lord?" Chesvia rubbed her sore eyes. The short version: those ancient wizards didn't leave a manual, just research logs full of nonsense and manic hymns. Her languid tone vanished as she stood and moved to a detailed map of the Kingdom of Rising Wind. "But I have found something interesting." She picked up a charcoal pencil, her movements precise. "We already know about the facilities beneath the capital and right here under our noses, but I've located 3 more." She circled a spot in the eastern mountains, Peeling Chapel. Benjamin's pupils shrank. He remembered the whispers, the missing pope. "Do you know why it's called that?" Chesvia asked, her voice devoid of humor. "The second resurrection facility is there. It likely houses the skin of the goddess of magic." Benjamin felt a chill crawl up his spine. Skin. The pencil moved north to Pearl City, the territory of Lord Hill. "The 6th facility," she noted. "The goddess's eyes are sealed there." Finally, she traced a path to the southernmost forests, the temple of the Earth Mother. "The 5th facility, it contains the goddess's womb." Benjamin snatched the pencil, his mind racing. He sketched the movements of the deadborn army over her marks. The lines matched perfectly. "They are following orders," he murmured. "They are moving toward the remains." The crisis was no longer a shadow, it was a map. Benjamin turned to Chesvia, trying to lighten the heavy silence. "You've done a great service. Tell me, what reward do you want?" Chesvia didn't hesitate. "Velvet sheets, thick blankets, and a pillow I can bury myself in. I want a beauty sleep, and don't you dare wake me, even if the sky falls." Benjamin waved his hand with a triumphant flourish. "I grant it." He promised Chesvia the most luxurious velvet bedding in the kingdom, pillows so thick one could burrow into them like a nest. Chesvia offered a weary compliment, her jaw dropping in a massive yawn, but as she turned to leave, Benjamin stopped her. "Wait," he urged, pointing to a map of the capital and the back mountains. "According to your theory, what component of the goddess is kept in these facilities?" Chesvia didn't even raise her eyelids. "The 1st facility in the capital likely holds the brain or soul," she murmured. "The 7th is simpler, internal organs, the heart, liver, and intestines." Benjamin's lips twitched in disgust. "That doesn't sound very clean." He paused, his brow furrowing. Then, "Why haven't we found them? We searched everywhere. They couldn't have grown legs and run away." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of candlelight. When Chesvia finally looked up, Benjamin's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes were no longer their natural shade. They had transformed into pools of pure, dazzling, liquid gold. "Perhaps," she said, her voice carrying a haunting, guiding tone, "mortal eyes are not meant to look directly at such things. They exist there, yet not here. If you truly wish to find them, you must look in a different way." Benjamin nodded slowly, suppressing a shiver. He dismissed her to her rest, and as she left, the golden light in her eyes faded back into a sleepy dullness. Meanwhile, at the Blackrock Territory border camp, chaos erupted. A thunderous asterisk bang echoed as an interrogation tent was ripped apart from the inside. Barren Guise was launched through the air like a projectile, crashing into the freezing mud. Diona tumbled out after him, disheveled and gasping. "What kind of monstrous strength is this?" Guise roared, spitting blood. From the wreckage of the tent, the elf and dwarf captives rose, but they were no longer thin prisoners. Their limbs were contorted, skin writhing with ominous bulges, and pale flames flickered in their eyes. Around the camp, fallen corpses began to rise at bizarre angles, lunging at terrified soldiers. Guise charged the dwarf monster, his sword whistling through the air. He severed the creature's neck with a sickening asterisk crack, but the headless horror didn't falter. It slammed a fist into the Baron's chest, sending him flying back into a fence. Diona fared no better. Unarmed and desperate, he traded 20 blows with the elven monster, but his strikes felt like hitting solid tree bark. A rib snapped, the pain blinding him, and just as the monster lunged for a killing blow, a voice rang out in Diona's mind. "Don't be nervous, open your hands." Instinctively, Diona reached out. Suddenly, his steel spear appeared in his right hand, and a strange, golden sword materialized in his left. But as he gripped his spear, a round eye opened on the tip, and a jagged mouth split the wood of the shaft. "Holy crap," the spear shouted. "What are you waiting for, bro? Aim for that white-eyed bastard's head and smash his brains out." Diona stood frozen, gripping a talking weapon and a phantom sword, wondering if he had finally, truly, lost his mind. "Hey, you idiot, what are you doing striking that frozen pose? That pointy-eared bastard is charging at us." The incessant chattering from the gun barrel, a voice like a bucket of ice water, snapped Diona back to reality. Before he could process the impossibility of a talking weapon, his instincts took over. As an elven monster lunged with razor-sharp claws, Diona thrust his spear forward. The strike was clumsy, and the monster easily dodged, its talons aiming straight for Diona's heart. But then the impossible happened. The mouth on the spear's handguard slid down the shaft like a living thing, stretching wide to bite down hard on the monster's wrist. Crack! As the creature faltered, a strange half-sword appeared in Diona's left hand. Moving with a mind of its own, the blade slashed upward, piercing the monster's armpit. "Now stab it, aim for the eye socket," the spear howled with excitement. "Harder, deeper, oh that feels good." Diona obeyed, his muscles bulged as he drove the steel tip through the monster's open maw and out the back of its skull. The creature's eyes flickered out like dying candles before it collapsed. "Nice, pull it out, don't let it stick," the spear urged. As Diona caught his breath, a roar erupted from behind. Barren guys, fighting like a maddened warbear, swung a massive greatsword, cleaving a headless dwarf monster in two. Diona moved to join him, but his weapon spoke first. "Wow, that was powerful," the spear praised, its tone turning slightly sour. "I really envy the swordsman who gets stroked by your rough hands." Guys froze, his blood-stained finger trembling as he pointed at the spear's rolling eye and smacking lips. "You, that thing in your hand talks." There was no time for explanations. More corpses were rising. Guys threw himself back into the fray, and Diona followed. Suddenly, the chattering spear and agile sword felt like natural extensions of his own nerves. A word flashed through his mind: Nyanrin *, the legendary Nen blade. With a thought, Diona hurled his sword. It spun through the air, pinning an elf's head to the ground before flying back into his palm at a mere whim. "Hey, cool move, bro, do it again," the spear cheered. Amidst the blood, Diona couldn't help but wonder, what would the pious knight Walter think of this? Miles away at a supply site, Walter stood ramrod straight, supervising a convoy. Suddenly, a strange unease washed over him, a feeling as if he had been inexplicably outshone. Suppressing the feeling, he turned to his sergeants, Geoffrey and Pietro. His voice was cold and clear as he issued their orders: escort the supplies to Stone Cliff territory at all costs. "Your vigilance must be at its highest," Walter warned. "Wild animals, bandits, or deserters, anyone who approaches must be driven away. It is better to be wrong than negligent. This batch of supplies cannot be lost." As the convoy rolled into the snow, Walter watched them go, the inexplicable anxiety still lingering in his mind like a shadow. Recently, Celia's sleep has become a battlefield of whispers. A hazy, blue figure shrouded in a thin, ghostly veil murmurs at the edge of her consciousness. "There is no need to try any more," the voice sighs. "The kingdom of your dreams never existed. Let it go." Each time Celia wakes from these haunting suggestions, she is drenched in a cold sweat. She fears it is her own self-doubt manifesting in her most vulnerable moments. But she refuses to break. She is no longer a girl acting on impulse. She is Celia Windsor, a princess of the blood. With the capital sliding into a terrifying abyss, she realizes she needs more than just a title. She needs an army. During a routine audience with Grand Duke Upton of the South, Celia stops playing games. She firmly demands an independent force to deal with the kingdom's upheaval. To her shock, the Duke does not dismiss her. He sits in his ornate mahogany chair, tapping his fingers in deep thought. "Your concern is moving," Upton says softly, "but the South is not peaceful. We have ungrateful parasites gnawing at our foundation." He leans forward, his voice dropping to a low, anguished growl as he describes mobs and rebels who have slaughtered noble families. He spreads a map before her, pointing to regions stained in dark red. "Eradicate these malignant tumors in the name of the royal family," he proposes, "and I will give you 5,000 garrison troops." 5,000 men, a regular, well-equipped army. Celia accepts almost instantly. "I will personally lead this army," she declares. "I will restore order." But as Celia dives into military preparations, her head maid, a woman who knows the sharp edges of court intrigue, approaches her with a trembling voice. "Your Highness," she whispers, "the area you are going to, it is where Lord Finn's guerrillas operate." Celia is undeterred, believing she can simply recruit Finn to her cause, but the maid's worry cuts deeper. "Your Highness, we are becoming the Duke's broom. He sends us wherever it is dirty to clean up his mess. Do you truly believe this army will belong to you once the work is done?" Celia freezes for a moment, the needle of doubt piercing her resolve. She knows the Duke's kindness is a trap, but she has no other choice. "At least for now," Celia says, looking out at the sunlit troops. "We have the power to act, and that is enough." The sound of hooves like rapid, frantic drumbeats tears through the midnight air of Warm Water Bay. Finn practically tumbles from his horse, his boots slamming heavily into the dew-dampened mud. He charges through the gates of the vine-covered manor, and then he freezes. Before him stands a towering inferno. The Lord's magnificent stone and wood mansion has been transformed into a giant torch. Raging flames lick the night sky, turning the world into a flickering canvas of orange red and menacing black shadows. The air is thick with the crackling of burning timber and the thunderous rumble of collapsing beams. But even more jarring than the fire is the scene in the center of the courtyard. Several thick, charred logs have been lashed together to form a makeshift gallows. Above them, like dried meat, hangs a row of figures. At the forefront is the local lord, his face contorted and swollen purple with suffocation. Behind him hang his wife, his two half-grown children, and their servants. Their toes dangle limply toward the ground, casting long swaying shadows in the firelight. The flames illuminate the crowd gathered below. They are ragged, emaciated men and women holding pitchforks and rusted sickles. Their faces are covered in soot, but their eyes burn with a fanaticism more intense than the fire itself. When Finn appears, the crowd erupts in a cheer that nearly lifts the night upside down. "Lord Finn," they scream, "we are free. These blood-sucking maggots will never exploit us again." Finn stands paralyzed. He feels as if all the blood has drained from his body. He had wanted to give these people hope, a way to fight for their lives, but he never imagined this. A cold voice echoes in his heart. "Don't you feel hypocritical now, Finn?" He remembers Rainsong territory, where he had tacitly approved of thorough measures against his enemies. He had only frowned and said, "Don't do it again." How could these desperate people have done anything but imitate him? "Sir," a familiar voice pulls him back. His lieutenant Theron rushes to his side and kneels. "This is the third such incident, done in your name. Please punish us. The situation has completely spiraled out of control." Finn's voice is hoarse. "Now is not the time to judge. If we were to judge, wouldn't I be the one at fault?" He feels a wave of dizziness. Violence, once ignited, devours justice and leaves only bloodshed. He knows the Grand Duke of the South will not tolerate this. A true elite army will come, and these serfs armed only with pitchforks will be crushed. He cannot abandon them now. He cannot tell them they have gone too far and leave them to die. Slowly, Finn turns to the expectant, uneasy crowd. The flames crackle, illuminating the shadows on his face. "Pass down the order," Finn commands. "Contact every rebel leader. Abandon the scattered strongholds and regroup at the river swamp. Inventory every weapon and every scrap of food, even a sharpened stick. We prepare for what comes next." The Rookie Wing Station, named by Lord Benjamin himself, is now the frantic heart of Frost Town. Once a simple training ground for male hawks, it has evolved into a reinforced hub for the United Commune's vital correspondence. Evelyn hurries through the biting snow, her cloak pulled tight, and enters the station. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of wet feathers, leather, and ink. The supervisor gestures toward a locked oak box. "The priority letters are ready, Minister," he says. Evelyn unlocks the chest, securing the most sensitive documents in her leather bag before heading toward the administrative center. In the corridor, she encounters Administrator Sullivan and Minister Walter. Sullivan's eyes gleam with a familiar, radical spark. He is preoccupied with the stubborn neighbors, those minor lords who refuse to join the commune but still crave its technology and warmth. "I've suggested a military persuasion to Walter," Sullivan says with a sharp grin. Walter remains stoic, crows. "Sing his arms. Your suggestions sounded remarkably like a detailed invasion plan, Administrator." Evelyn dryly notes that Sullivan rarely jokes about power. The administrator shrugs, pivoting to a more economical approach. He asks Evelyn about her contacts in the hidden church, mercenaries who might leave unpleasant gifts on a lord's pillow for the right price in gold. But then, he shares a more elegant strategy suggested by Sarah. Since these fence-sitters are surrounded by our members, Sullivan explains, we could simply adjust our trade policies, raise their security taxes, cut their quotas for life-saving briquettes and seeds. He laughs softly. No weapons required, just the cold reality of isolation. Later, Evelyn presents the sordid mail to Lord Benjamin. He flips through reports from Stonecliffe and Ironforge, but his brow furrows. He is searching for news from the south. Livia's silence is understandable, Benjamin mutters, tossing aside a brief note from Pearl City. But Finn and Celia, it has been months. He leans back, staring at the map. The southern reach has become an information black hole, swallowing his old comrades whole. Suppressing his growing dread, Benjamin looks up at Evelyn. We must deal with the immediate first, he sighs. How is Chesvia's progress this month? I hope your observations are complete. Evelyn opened her notebook, her voice steady as she delivered the report. Over the past month, Minister Chesvia's eyes have exhibited a peculiar golden hue a total of 51 times. More than two-thirds of these occurrences happened in just the last 2 weeks, a clear upward trend. She described the sessions, ranging from mere minutes during delicate experiments to a full hour late at night, when Chesvia thought she was alone. Despite the change, her behavior remained consistent. She still complained about the salty cafeteria stew and discussed work with perfect clarity. There was no aggression, only a deep, lingering fatigue once the gold faded. Evelyn paused, her expression softening. 2 days ago, while in that state, she asked me, "What kind of Nen blade do you want?" She has been asking everyone from the workshop to the kitchen. Benjamin leaned forward, his interest piqued. "And your answer?" "I told her I wanted a blade to split myself in two," Evelyn replied seriously, "to have the workload and double the happiness of a winter afternoon." Benjamin chuckled, noting that Chesvia had found that answer just as charming, but his smile quickly vanished. "And, have you seen any other colors, red perhaps?" "No, sir," Evelyn confirmed, "only gold." A heavy silence fell. Evelyn stepped out of her professional role, her voice trembling with the concern of a friend. "What is happening to her, Benjamin? I am afraid that one day, she will become someone we don't recognize." Benjamin didn't hide his worry. "I am trying to find that answer myself, Evelyn. For now, just spend time why. Her, eat her desserts, listen to her complaints. Having someone to share those moments with is a happiness in itself." After Evelyn departed, Benjamin stood alone, haunted by the word divinity asterisk. Was Chesvia an embodiment of a rule, a higher life form? Her connection to the pale goddess was undeniable, especially during those rare, terrifying moments when her eyes turned crimson, revealing a destructive, unrecognizable entity. "I need to know more," he whispered to the shadows. He set out for the 7th resuscitation facility, but he did not go alone. Walking through the damp, echoing metal corridors, Benjamin was flanked by Aphrodite. The bishop's lantern cast long, flickering shadows against the moldy walls. "I thought this archaeology was more suited to Miss Chesvia," Aphrodite remarked. "Chesvia has unearthed enough horrors," Benjamin replied, his boots echoing on the grill. "When it comes to deities and the supernatural, there is no one more suited than you." The passageway to the 7th recovery facility was far busier than Benjamin had anticipated. Since its transformation into a research refuge, Frosttown had dispatched engineering teams to reinforce the ancient structure. Along the stone corridors, makeshift torches flickered, casting long shadows as the rhythmic sound of distant knocking and muffled conversations echoed through the halls. Benjamin and Aphrodite walked side by side. Breaking the silence, Benjamin asked with a casual shrug, "So, Aphrodite, as a bishop, what kind of being is your goddess of the celestial garden, really?" Aphrodite stopped, giving Benjamin a look of pure disbelief. "Barren, asking a clergyman to assess his deity as if she were a common commodity is, well, highly inappropriate." Benjamin laughed it off, patting the bishop's shoulder. "We're friends. Besides, I have news regarding your missing pope. Chesvia deciphered some documents. It's highly relevant." Aphrodite froze, his relaxed demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by a sharp, reproachful stare. "And you're only telling me this asterisk now asterisk?" "Don't worry," Benjamin teased, "we're heading to the very place where more clues might hide." As they continued, Aphrodite's voice turned steady, stating facts rather than preaching. He explained that his church was born as a mirror to the Pale Church. Where the Pale Church demanded asceticism and rigid hierarchy, the garden embraced simple pleasures and inner peace. We found that whenever we acted with kindness, Aphrodite whispered, the goddess seemed happy. Her responses became clearer. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you're just trying to curry favor with the boss. Aphrodite rolled his eyes. It isn't dogma, Benjamin. It is a genuine feeling of support from the depths of the heart. It is why you, the so-called chosen one, can wield the Nen blade. He then grinned mischievously. Sure you don't want to be a bishop? The sleep is excellent and the gossip, I mean. Divine revelations are top tier. Go away, Benjamin laughed, pushing him toward the main control room. The joking stopped as they reached the facility's core. Aphrodite sat upon a stone ledge and produced a vibrant red rose, its fragrance unnaturally sweet in the stale underground air. Go on then, the bishop said softly. I'll keep watch, just try not to knock yourself out. Benjamin stepped into the center of the room and closed his eyes. He activated the Nen blade not as a weapon, but as a sensory web reaching out into the ancient depths to see the invisible truths hidden within the cold, silent stone. The scene was so warm and inviting it seemed unreal. Benjamin's mother took his hand, leading him into a neighbor's sun-drenched house where tea steamed in the air. With a gentle ruffle of his hair, she sent him outside to play. There, a little girl with fluffy black hair and chubby cheeks squatted among brightly colored wooden toys. She was his closest childhood playmate, a classic childhood sweetheart. That is enough, the adult Benjamin's consciousness coldly intervened. In the illusion, the young boy's face shifted into an incongruous, adult-like expression of annoyance. Why is the non-existent memory loading again? The budget for this character modeling must be quite generous. The girl looked up, her eyes, once bright, were now empty and ethereal. How did you find out? She asked, her voice devoid of emotion. This time, my hair is black. You forgot to erase my memory, director, Benjamin retorted. The girl tilted her head. Then, let us start over. Stop, Benjamin raised a hand. Skip the backstory, get to the point. A ripple of emotion crossed her face. You have come to see me again, I am happy. Benjamin remained on high alert, feeling the suffocating powerlessness of being spied upon. Who are you? He demanded. The girl paused, then offered a trade. Answering requires an equivalent reward. You must answer one of my questions. Then my question is null, Benjamin snapped. I already know who you are, the goddess of magic, or rather what she used to be. The girl's lips curved upward. So, am I yes or not? She tossed the riddle back, then asked her own. How far would you go for someone you care about? Before Benjamin could answer, the world blurred like a faded oil painting, looking forward to the next time. Benjamin snapped his eyes open. The icy air of Facility 7 filled his lungs. He stood drenched in sweat before the bishop, Aphrodite. 30 breaths, Aphrodite stated, scrutinizing him. What did you see? I met a goddess, Benjamin gasped. Every thought I had was laid bare. It was terrible. As Aphrodite's composure crumbled in shock, Benjamin turned toward the center of the room. A part of her is right here, he whispered. Aphrodite saw only cold metal and broken panels, but Benjamin's mental blades felt it, a vast, complex, and absolute coldness. It was a solidified mass of organs that had lost all function. Organs that once belonged to a god, silently suspended in the invisible center of the room. After witnessing the unsettling sight of the goddess's organs, Benjamin and Aphrodite returned to the administrative center, only to find a commotion. A small crowd has gathered around Diona, who looks travel-worn but wears a flush of pure excitement. As Benjamin approaches, the group disperses to reveal Diona clutching two weapons, a straight spear and a hand-and-a-half sword. My lord, Diona shouts, waving the sharp steel a bit too enthusiastically. Benjamin laughs, gesturing for him to lower the blades before an accident occurs. I have become a chosen one of the gods, Diona proclaims. The news stuns everyone, even the composed Bishop Aphrodite. In Frosttown, such an awakening is a monumental omen. Benjamin, eyes gleaming with curiosity, asks for a demonstration. Diona nervously coaxes the spear to speak. Suddenly, a literal eye opens on the shaft, followed by a mouth. In a sophisticated baritone, the weapon greets Benjamin with the flair of a stage actor. Good heavens, Benjamin chuckles, a weapon that doubles as a travel companion. While the spear boasts of its musical talents, Walter stands to the side, arms crossed. His face is a mask of stoic pride, but a twitch of his lip betrays a clear sense of envy. Aphrodite, regaining his dignity, officially bestows the title of goddess warrior upon Diona. Benjamin then turns to the silent brass sword. Does this one sing duets? Diona admits it hasn't said a word. From the doorway, Evelyn offers a dry, nonsensical guess. I bet it makes soup. Ignoring the soup comment, Benjamin decides the talking spear needs a proper name. Aphrodite suggests something poetic involving roses. Benjamin grins and settles on two grand titles. The spear shall be the red rose of demon slayer asterisk, and the silent sword, the yellow rose of inevitable annihilation asterisk. The levity fades as the inner circle moves to a private room. Diona recounts his grim report from Blackrock territory, tales of dwarves, elves, and the deadborn, corpses rising with eerie white flames in their eyes. Benjamin ponders the connection to the distant royal capital. The clues are fragments of a larger, darker puzzle. We cannot hope this is an isolated case, Benjamin warns, his voice heavy. Blackrock is just the tip of the iceberg, and we must be ready for what comes next. Inside the Lord's office in Frosttown, the fireplace cast flickering, orange shadows across Benjamin's face. He had just finished recounting a horrifying discovery. The Chapel of Skinning was hidden beneath the Wizard Empire's revival facility, and the very skin of the goddess of magic might be sealed within its depths. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the crackling of burning wood. Aphrodite murmured, "Is that so?" His usual listless expression was gone, replaced by a look of profound distress. When Benjamin pressed him for his thoughts, Aphrodite shook his head with a forced, hollow smile. He explained that the Eastern Territory was the stronghold of the Pale Church, an iron plate they could not hope to crack. His own Spirit Garden Church simply lacked the strength to interfere. Benjamin didn't push. Instead, he asked about the Holy War Army being assembled by the various denominations. Aphrodite stood and threw open the heavy wooden window. An icy wind swept in, scattering papers and whipping his golden hair, but he didn't seem to feel the chill. He explained that the army was moving in 3 routes toward the royal capital. The fastest group, marching south from the north, had already reached the territory of Stone Cliff. At the border of Stone Cliff, the village of Mousegrass had become a silent tombstone. The villagers were gone, replaced by a crude defensive line of overturned carts and frozen earth. Behind these walls stood no professional soldiers, but a ragtag assembly of monks, wandering knights, and devout believers from the Spirit Garden, Earth Mother, and Furnace churches. They gripped maces and logging axes with trembling, pale hands. Strangely, amidst the tension, the melancholic sound of a harpsichord and bagpipes drifted through the air, a desperate attempt to find warmth in the biting cold. Suddenly, a sharp eagle cry pierced the sky. A giant gray bird plummeted toward the earth, transforming midair into a man. It was Ferdinand, a chosen of the Earth Mother. He landed heavily, his voice urgent. "They are coming, the deadborn are approaching, and the snow does not slow them." Panic rippled through the crowd. Bishop Camus of the Spirit Garden tried to offer a calm blessing, but he was interrupted by Sergeant Linsel, a weary commander sent to coordinate this chaotic volunteer alliance. Linsel shouted orders, trying to organize the monks into a fighting formation, but he knew the truth. These people were more used to preaching than war. The wind intensified, swallowing the last notes of the music. The deadborn, tireless and cold, were closing in. With the main Stone Cliff forces tied down elsewhere, this makeshift army was all that stood in the way. They waited in the howling white, listening to the sound of their own racing hearts. The March of the Dead was not an army, it was a moving natural disaster. From the snow-covered gray horizon, they emerged as wriggling black dots, merging into a surging tidal wave of corpses. Many of these individuals burned with a cold, blackened white flame, a silent river of fire spreading across the wasteland. Sergeant Lindsay felt a prayer squeeze out of his dry throat. The numbers were impossible to gauge. He could only scream frantically in his heart, "Reinforcements, Lord Calvin, send the Griffin Knights." Beside him, an operator swung a wooden mallet with a hoarse shout. Bang! A catapult launched a stone the size of a millstone eye. NTO, the horde, crack! It crushed a few victims, but the gap was instantly submerged by the endless tide. It was like a child throwing stones into the sea. Nearby, a young monk's prayer abruptly ceased. He drew his sword with an inhuman shout and charged the crumbling breastwork. The world split in two, the silent, raging tide of death on one side, and the distorted roars of the living on the other. Lindsay touched his ear and felt warm, sticky blood. His eardrums had ruptured. Suddenly, a giant black-bodied bird with pale flames in its eyes swooped down, its claws digging into a young soldier. Lindsay, eyes bloodshot, hurled his spear with every ounce of his strength. The spear pierced the beast and it crashed into the ruins. But there was no time to breathe. A roar from the depths of the earth slammed into his chest. Boom! The frontal barrier exploded as a massive earth dragon, a cave-dwelling magical beast, squeezed through the breach. Lindsay raised a battle axe, charging the monster with a throat-tripping roar for Stone Cliff territory. Before he could reach it, two figures swept past. A priest erupted a cloud of freezing mist while a bald giant leaped high, slamming a massive double-edged axe into the dragon's skull. Crack. Miles away in the quiet of Stone Cliff, Lord Calvin stood as his squires meticulously buckled his armor. Click. The last shoulder plate snapped shut. Calvin gripped his heavy longsword and strode to the training grounds where 20 griffin riders waited. His voice pierced the wind. Shiliko village is bleeding. Those fighting are not our soldiers but volunteers and monks. They stand on our asterisk land at the forefront of the kingdom. He drew his sword, pointing it to the leaden sky. This is our responsibility. Griffin Knights, take off. With a deafening roar of wings, the knights soared into the storm, hurtling toward the flames of death. The wind howled across the western border, stinging the eyes of a young sentry named Harris. He squinted against the frost, watching a blurry, dark stain bleed out from the distant woodland. At first he thought it was merely snow dust, but the dots grew, merging into a silent army of human figures advancing through the waste. An ominous premonition gripped his heart. Harris turned, rushing toward the narrow stairs to ring the alarm bell and wake his sleeping comrades, but he was too late. A faint sound, almost entirely masked by the wind, cut through the air. Whish. Harris felt an invisible hammer strike his chest. He staggered back against the stone wall, staring down in disbelief at a rough arrow shaft embedded in his heart. Numbness spread through his limbs. He tried to scream, but only a hoarse gasp escaped. As his vision darkened, the last thing he saw was the closed door of the barracks. And the shadows drawing closer, the outpost fell in silence. Miles away at the residence of Prince Alkea, the atmosphere was anything but silent. The halls were a chaos of hurried footsteps and anxious whispers. Inside the council chamber, a violent asterisk crash echoed as Grand Duke Charles smashed a wooden table to splinters. "Those pointy-eared bastards!" Charles roared, his face flushed with rage. He clutched a roll of fine, silver-sheen paper, a letter from the Silver Kingdom of the Elves. The message was a cold insult, claiming the border massacres were merely the work of uncivilized, remote tribes and had nothing to do with the Elven crown. "Calm down, Charles," Prince Alkea interrupted, his voice like ice. The prince remained analytical, noting that while the simultaneous attacks across the Grey Whisper Mountains were unprecedented, the elves lacked the heavy equipment to take fortified cities. Alkea's eyes sharpened as he laid out the strategy. Issue a mandatory order. Fortify the defenses, clear the fields, and mobilize the Second Legion. We must show those pointy-eared ones that the western frontier is indestructible. Charles nodded, his fury cooling into grim resolve. The vanguard has already set off, but the timing of this, right after the chaos in the capital, it is too damn coincidental. "I do not believe in coincidences," Alkea replied softly. He looked toward the horizon, his mind turning to the one region that remained eerily still. "Tell me, is there any news from the east? It is too quiet, I wonder. Does the Eastern Territory still belong to this kingdom, or has it finally become the private property of the Pale Church?" High atop the terraces of Pearl City, Hill stood wrapped in a heavy cloak of goosedown and fox fur, looking out over her prosperous northern domain. She had noticed a shift in the air lately. The suspicious, piercing gazes of her rivals had softened. To a woman like Hill, this meant only two things. Either they had finally lost interest, or something far more dangerous was brewing in the kingdom, something that demanded their absolute attention. For 2 years, Hill had been cleaning up Pearl City with terrifying efficiency. Those who opposed her rule either saw their fortunes vanish overnight, or they simply failed to wake up from their sleep. She had no room for mercy. She preferred the cold weight of tangible power. Lately, her correspondence with Benjamin Blackwood, the Baron of Frosttown, and her former teammate had become unusually frequent. Back in their adventuring days, Benjamin was the logistics expert, a man who could lay a carpet with such precision it was almost an art form. Now Hill watched with a mix of admiration and annoyance as he applied that same precision to the chessboard of politics. He had managed to weave a loose alliance of bickering lords, and even Hill's own informants were starting to send back reports praising his brilliance. His latest letter, however, was different. It spoke of the Deadborn army, a tide of monsters threatening to break through Stone Cliff territory, but the true shock was their target, Pearl City itself. Benjamin claimed that an ancient ruin lay beneath her streets, and the dead were coming to reclaim something buried within. Interesting, Hill murmured to herself. Benjamin had anticipated her skepticism. He provided a map of the enemy's route and a tantalizing offer. If she explored the ruins, he would provide the only translator capable of reading the ancient documents found inside. He even admitted he wouldn't let their old friend Calvin stand alone against the threat at Stone Cliff. Hill's gaze sharpened. She knew the military threat to her city was low for now. The Northern Grand Duke would never let an army march through his lands unchallenged. Benjamin knew this, too. He was being honest because he had to be. Very good, Hill whispered, a dangerous smile playing on her lips. A friend who puts his calculations out in the open is always more lovable than one who stabs you in the back, though she secretly counted herself as the latter. She began drafting 2 letters. The first was a teasing reply to Benjamin accepting his proposal. The second was a secret order to the Grey Eagle mercenary group. Whether Benjamin was right or wrong, it was time to uncover the secrets beneath her feet, if there was a treasure the dead desired. The mistress of Pearl City intended to claim it first. Gus slammed the door open, the force of his charge rattling the torches of Blackrock Castle. He didn't stop to shed his mud-caked cloak or heavy armor, clattering up the stone stairs in a desperate rush. A message from the front lines had shattered his focus on the campaign against the alien races. His wife, Elena, had fallen into a sudden, death-like coma. He burst into the master bedroom, his breath coming in ragged gasps. There, amidst silk pillows and down comforters, lay Elena. Her face was a heartbreaking, ghostly white, her chest barely moving. Gus felt an icy hand grip his heart. Tears welling, he collapsed by the bed. "The sound of you opening the door is too loud," a weary, impatient voice whispered. Gus jolted. Elena's eyes were open, tired, but sharp with her usual disapproval. Relief flooded him, but his joy was short-lived. Elena stopped his frantic rambling about doctors and drafts. "It is not a cold, Gus," she said softly. She spoke of a voice, a persistent, indistinct whisper in her ear, commanding her to reclaim something. A chill raced down Gus's spine. It was the same voice described by the elven captives he had interrogated. Elena reached out, her cool fingertips touching his cheek. She spoke of her childhood as an outcast and a curse she could no longer escape. Sensing an approaching end, she pleaded with him to curb his recklessness and, to his surprise, urged him to consult the principled Baron Blackwood of Frosttown in the future. Meanwhile, in Frosttown, Baron Benjamin reviewed a secret letter. Blackrock was offering a massive reward for a doctor. He summoned Chesvia, the brilliant but eccentric director of his clinic. "Bring the dead back to life," Chesvia scoffed, though she couldn't hide her pride. "Who do they think I am?" Despite her grumbling, the allure of a field expert allowance and a year-end bonus quickly won her over. Benjamin promised her a full escort, including Diona and Evelyn, and a high-speed railcar for the journey. Most importantly, he promised online technical support via his Nenblade connection to ensure her safety. With a sharp mock salute and a glint of greed in her eyes, Chesvia declared herself ready to go through fire and water for the mission. 4 specially designed manned railcars race along the straight tracks, their wheels creating a rhythmic click-clack symphony against the whistling winter wind. On each vehicle, 4 strong soldiers operate a modified lever mechanism, rowing through the air like a longboat on land. Diona sits under the canopy of the second car, his face beaming with excitement. "When I left for the west," he shouts over the wind, "Lord Suleiman said this was still in testing. Now, just days later, we are flying across the rails." Evelyn, sitting beside him, nods as she checks her gear. "Blackrock territory spared no expense," she explains. "Baron Guise values this connection even more than the main line to Silverstream." Opposite them, Chesvia, wrapped tightly in a thick blanket, reaches into a wicker basket and produces 2 warm, golden cakes. She shoves one into Evelyn's hand and offers the other to Diona. "Try this," she says simply. I used a bit too much sugar, but it will warm you. Diona takes a bite, his eyes lighting up at the fluffy, milky sweetness. As they eat, Chesvia points toward the snowy hillside where terraced fields rise like giant steps. Figures move among the rows. Those are improved winter turnips, Chesvia notes, cold-resistant and fast-growing. Evelyn sighs, her voice filled with a longing for abundance. If these seeds could be spread throughout the kingdom, no one would ever starve again. Chesvia remains silent. She cannot tell them the truth that these crops are fed by a diluted, pale green liquid extracted from a forbidden cultivation pool. She has used her psychic blades to strip away the most dangerous mutations, but the essence remains a wizard's tool for editing life. This is a dangerous experiment. The harvest is meant for livestock first, to see if the meat becomes tainted or the offspring deformed. Suddenly, Chesvia feels two pairs of expectant eyes on her. Evelyn and Diona have finished their cakes and are staring at the basket like hungry pups. Don't be like Marie waiting to be fed, she huffs, though she smiles as she reveals more cookies and dough rings. Take them, we still have a long way to go. When the convoy finally reaches Blackrock Castle, Baron Guise is waiting at the gate. He attempts a friendly smile, though it looks more like a grimace, and bellows a welcome to Th. Divine Physician. He has heard of her miraculous skills, especially her ability to extract teeth without the usual risk of death. Chesvia cuts through his rehearsed pleasantries. The hospitality can wait, Baron. Take me to Lady Alina first. Her condition cannot wait. Relief washes over the Baron's face. He casts aside his formal act and personally leads her toward the main building. Following him, Chesvia realizes Benjamin was right. Getting straight to the point was the fastest way to earn the Baron's trust. In Chesvia's memory, Alina was a petite and elegant noblewoman, but now, lying on the heavily draped bed, she looks even thinner, more frail, as if a gust of wind could blow her away. Chesvia begins her inspection. She observes the pale complexion, listens to the incoherent descriptions from Baron Gus, and gently places her fingers on Alina's cold wrist. Low-grade fever, irregular heart rate, intermittent palpitations, she mutters. Her expertise is in surgery, not internal medicine. Without specialized equipment, she would be helpless. But things are different now. Chesvia closes her eyes. Her mind calms as her unique psychic blade activates. Threads of perception, finer than a strand of hair, seep into Alina's body. This is not a scan, it is internal vision. She sees exhausted organs, disordered currents, and then something deeper. Inside Alina, she finds a black and white, coldly burning flame. It is devoid of heat, yet it steadily scorches every part of her body. Transformation, the word jumps into Chesvia's mind. Alina is being forcibly turned into a deadborn. Suddenly, an unnamed rage erupts like a volcano from Chesvia's heart. The room begins to move even though there is no wind. Her hair defies gravity, swaying with a faint whirring sound. The candlelight flickers erratically. What is going on? Baron Gus cries out in confusion. Diona freezes, recognizing the prelude to Chesvia's madness, but Evelyn glares her into silence. Evelyn turns to the Baron, her voice steady and reverent. Please, do not panic. The minister is using her mind blade, a rare divine power, to delve into the root of the lady's illness. Just as Chesvia's rage is about to break through, about to violently purify the flames, a voice rings in her consciousness. Stop. It is Benjamin. Through their telepathic connection, his mind intervenes. Stop immediately. Don't stop me, Chesvia's thoughts resist. That thing must be removed. This is her body *. Benjamin's resolve suppresses her. You must respect her wishes. Chesvia blinks, her eyes regaining clarity. She releases Alina's hand and turns to the trembling Baron. Baron Gus, is there any record of hereditary mental illness in the lady's bloodline? Gus stammers, I have never heard of such a thing. Chesvia nods, well, now she is pregnant. Gus has no time to react. In the next second, Alina's body convulses violently, her yes snap open, burning with that same black and white fire. Then, with a sickening sound, a torrent of cold flames erupts from her mouth, nose, and eyes. The room is swallowed by an eerie, silent glow as the lady begins to burn.